Well, welcome everybody. This is wonderful and we're delighted to have you all here. Before I invite the Vice Chancellor, Professor Nick Beach, to welcome you all to the day, I have some symposium protocols to go through very quickly and a welcome on behalf of the team. And also following on from Professor Nick Beach will be our colleague, Professor Paul Gibbs, who's going to be talking about the international scope of transdisciplinarity. So let me get on with the symposium protocols, and that will give time for more people to arrive because most of you will have had these as participants. So here we go. Right. I hope you can all see those. Dominic, are they coming up on the screen okay? Fantastic, thank you. Okay, the symposium protocols, right. Now these are, each session is 1 hour and there's a host to explain the protocols for each session, and the sessions will be recorded. But if any of you, and they'll be recorded to share with people. So if any of you don't want to have it recorded, we do want you to stay with us. So just switch off your microphones and you can switch off your cameras as well. So if anyone in the audience is would prefer to have a recording later with, because of visual or auditory requirements, please email me and let me know. And there is no formal breakout sessions for this, and just think of it as one big virtual cafe. And if you have to leave during the proceedings, then try to come back for the open forum at the end so we can get all your questions. And my apologies to you all, because this wonderful enthusiasm for this particular symposium meant that so many of you tried to join, to sign up to the Miro board from Friday over the weekend and this morning. But we are not opening Miro till the first session today, because the first session is going to use Miro, and I think that will give you an idea of the purpose of Miro for us for the symposium over the coming 2 days. So it will be available for you there to use. And then there's the chat, which you'll all be familiar with, which you can use to ask questions. But remember, your host will guide you on the protocols for the sessions. And then we have a couple of other things just to say. We have launched a TD blog, and we invite you to contribute to that anytime you like. And we will put the link on the chat as well. And we are also in negotiations for a guide to transdisciplinary practice and research with international contributors from MDX staff, and of course, everything, case studies from candidates and alumni. And so all your contributions today are going to be just fabulous for that. So thank you very much. So I'm going to stop sharing that and the protocols, and I'm going to actually start the welcome, if I may. So here we go. So the team is absolutely delighted to have this opportunity to share with so many of you what candidates and alumni have been doing on our DProf and DProf by Public Works programs. And who better to share that with you than them? Think of this as the flavor of what we're doing, with more to come in the future. We've had little or no input into the sessions, and we're going to be like ourselves, probably quite surprised, but then there's a lot of learning in surprises, but I hope they're not too big surprises. These two programs have evolved considerably over the last 5 years or so due to a number of factors. And first of all, it's about the precedent that was set by the previous evolutionary jump of professional work-based learning, which was embraced by this university in the 1990s. The level of trust extended to the program team to enable the evolution to continue. That was an important factor. The core team, who have deep commitment to the philosophy, ethics, and concepts that sit behind transdisciplinary practice and creative research, and to the several colleagues in the university who've been wonderful in supporting and encouraging us in this endeavor. But the key factor is the many candidates and alumni keeping us at pace with rapidly changing contexts in the world of contemporary professional life. We owe much to their challenges to the academy, to be relevant to their sectors, and to become familiar with the complexities of their environments, which will enhance our knowledge exchange. You will find candidates and alumni diverse, imaginative, creative, full of energy, questioning, curious, and committed to bringing about what matters in small and large contexts through self-examination, collaboration, multi-perspective lens, and the imperative of inclusion. And yes, we are trying to keep up with them. So we do not work within a single discipline and sector. I'm just going to make that very clear. Our candidates are from diverse sectors within diverse roles and mostly at different levels of leadership. And we are not experts in planning wings for Airbus or judicial procedures in the European courts or rowing across 3 oceans or working in prisons or investment banks or the US Air Force or running national cricket teams or mathematics education or executive coaching in the US or gambling addiction in Hong Kong or high-level librarianship. No, they are the experts. But we do know something, I hope we know about practitioner research, the standards required, epistemologies of practice, agency, and professional contexts, and what kind of specialists to look for to add to the supervisory teams. I think we are of most value as the outsider looking in with that curiosity that seeks to understand the understanding a person has of their own environment, its practices and rituals, where their agency is situated and whether it is encouraged or repressed and other such things. We are continually learning to be translators and cross-pollinators. As researchers and supervisors, we work along the interconnecting synapses of all kinds of difference. As one person said, "Oh, I get it, you're spiders and bees." Well, that's one way of putting it. So, but really, what have we learned? We've learned about the experience of working with Airbus wings and judicial procedures and mathematics and cricket teams, enough to distill the commonalities and improve our translation skills. But we haven't yet formed an ocean rowing team. Maybe that should be another target. So what is this TD really? One could say it's many things, but it's not a discipline. It draws on many discourses and experiences of practice, and some would say it's a way of being that informs a way of doing, a way of revealing that has been hidden. It is perhaps the antithesis of an epistemology of ignorance. It is in many ways a different way of experiencing others, our world, our action in the world, and finding the words to share that. It is inquiring at the intersections and translating across difference. It is coherent, imaginative, emergent, and impactful. The nature of these programs today, their diversity and the conversations along the intersection of difference, which you will experience today, is transdisciplinary practice in action. We invite you to join the conversation, to be curious, share, and experience difference and what connects rather than what separates us. So with those closing words and in advance, apologies for any technological hitches for which we ask for your patience and obviously your forgiveness. So it's now with great pleasure, I have this great pleasure, I'm on behalf of the team, to introduce our Vice Chancellor, Professor Nick Beach, to formally open the symposium with his own words and welcome. And followed by Professor Paul Gibbs, who will share the international reach of transdisciplinarity. Again, I will leave you with this. As one person said, if you can say it, you can do it. Thank you.
Kate, thanks so much. My name's Nick Beach. I'm the Vice Chancellor of Middlesex, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you. I wish we were there in person. what a fascinating set of topics and what a fantastic approach this really is. I've been at Middlesex now for 14 months, and one of the things that really attracted me to Middlesex was this fantastic history of work-based and practice-based learning and research, the very things that Kate has been talking about. And really, Middlesex has been a first mover in the sector, in this area. And that's actually no surprise. The values, the ethics that underpin the whole approach that's been taken within the Middlesex culture really is about connectivity, it's about relevance, and it's about making a difference in the world. So this is exactly the area that we should be in and have been in for many years. We are in the process of starting a new strategy. We've been consulting on that now for nearly 6 months. And in that time, we've had over 3,500 contributions to the strategy, ideas, questions, points, illustrations, all of these things. And we're in the process of trying to pull that together into one university strategy. Now, you can imagine the joyful task that is of trying to summarize that down into something that people can actually remember, rather than having a 400-page strategy which lives in a file somewhere, and actually none of us can actually really bring to mind what is in it. So the headline for our new strategy that comes from all of that huge amount of consultation, the headline is that we are about putting knowledge into action. We're about creating and putting knowledge into action. And I think that fits perfectly with what you're here in this event to do. So that means that we have to operate in really quite an impact-oriented way in the research and in the learning and teaching that we operate with. And actually, we have great skills and achievements already in that field. If we look back at the last REF exercise, which looks at impact case studies, in other words, how much has the research that's been undertaken made a difference in the world, then 73% of our work was judged to be either world leading or international standard in the level of quality that it was achieving. Now that is a fantastic result by anybody's standards. And our aim is to continue with that, to expand it, and to do so in a way that is more inclusive and more radically creative. And therefore, that means that we have to have really highly developed forms of dialogue in which the point is that we understand each other better and that we can together push forward the boundaries of knowledge and practice, because those two things are utterly entwined. So within the new strategy, there is going to be a focus on research, and it's particularly a focus that puts practice at its heart. And that's done in different ways in different disciplines. So for example, in social sciences, quite often there's a designed-in approach to research and practice, in which rather than just doing some research remotely in the kind of the ivory tower and then hoping downstream somewhere an organization or a business or a particular professional can put it into practice, not that, but actually bringing the academics and practitioners into contact with each other to co-design what is it we want to do here, what difference do we want to make, what are the really taxing questions that we've got that we should spend our time working through. So that's a kind of designed-in approach that fits for some. There's another approach, a practice-based approach, which would include things like action research, and I imagine many of you are involved in that, in which there's a real focus on a specific form of practice and trying to develop that practice, sometimes learning from great examples, but also learning from things that have gone wrong, experimental modes of working, all of these sorts of things. And that fits for some disciplines. And thirdly, for other disciplines, and particularly ones based in creative industries, the idea of practice as research. So for example, some of the work dance colleagues have been undertaking is to express the theoretical and epistemological thinking that they're doing, so the sorts of things that Kate was talking about a moment ago, in the way that they then operate. So for example, the fantastic work they've done on using dance as a way of engaging with older people, both in terms of memory and in terms of physical and social well-being. So there's a range of different ways of doing it, and we're not prescriptive about that. But the thing that we are absolutely aspirational about is that through one or other of these methods, we can engage with each other and then really make a difference in the world. And that is what we mean by putting knowledge into action. Now, if we're going to be really successful in that, we also need to be quite clear on what are our targets, what are the areas that we're looking at. And this is where I think interdisciplinary working and transdisciplinary working is utterly crucial. So we want, as a university community, and I'm very deliberately using the word community, we want as that community to identify within some broad themes the things that we really want to push forward. And the three themes that we're planning to focus on as we move into the future are socioeconomic development, including cultural development. So that is thinking about not just improving businesses, but for example, improving micro and small businesses, which is a big part of what we do, and doing so in a way that really makes a difference in the world in terms of the social construction of power and engagement. So for example, we've got great work that goes on in entrepreneurship, but particularly women's entrepreneurship in certain parts of the world. Secondly, equity and improvements in health and well-being, and thinking about health and well-being in a broad way. So not just narrowly defining, can we invent better input to drugs or drug therapy? Absolutely, we want to do that sort of thing. But actually, if you look at the way that people's health change, it's not just about medication. It is very typically about their psychological setting, their social setting, and their broader physical health. So we're looking at that in a much more holistic way. And we're concerned, for example, with the way that education is part of that and people are more informed, and the way that social work and care is part of that, and the way that justice is part of that in terms of people being included and having choice and agency in society. So socioeconomic development, equity and improvement in health and well-being, and lastly, sustainability of communities and the environment. And this is about how people engage with each other, how they make use of resources, and how they preserve and conserve resources for future generations. So those are the three big themes that we have as a university. And you can see that from all of those, there is no way at all that they can be dealt with from a singular, narrow perspective. They have to be engaged with from a transdisciplinary set of perspectives. And that is what we think is really exciting. And that is what Middlesex is going to focus on as we move across the next 10 years. Now, that means that we need to think about ourselves as a community, that word I was using earlier, and not only a community, but a community of boundary crossers. So not people that are just in their neat silos, and there's a long and rich academic tradition of that happening, but actually we're interested in people who have got some level of expertise and a deep level of knowledge, either from their experience or from their academic study. But we're really interested in the people that want to put that into motion, to make it mobile, make it dynamic, and link to others, so that, for example, in the area of environment, of course, you've got people who study water and the physics of water, alongside the people who study and act on social perceptions on water usage and how we might change that. So you need both of these social and physical elements to work together. And you can't do that only academically, you have to think about it in practice and the way that practice is embedded in different parts of the world, because without one of those legs of the stool will certainly fall over. So I think we are already, and you are exemplary of this, a community of boundary crossers. What we want to do is build up those skills, build up that ethos, and take it to the world and grow it. So you can imagine from what I've just been saying in terms of the way we're strategizing about the next 10 years, that what you're doing here and what Kate and her team have been doing is actually completely central for us. I'm utterly delighted that you're doing this. I can't wait to see some of the outcomes from the conversations that you're having and some of the great examples of the work that you're doing. Real privilege to be here, absolutely delighted. And I look forward to hearing a bit more at the end of your 2 days together. So Kate, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're moving on to, let me introduce you to Professor Paul Gibbs, who is a key influence on not just our program and our thinking about transdisciplinary practice, but also he is an internationally recognized figure, and we are delighted that he's so much linked to our university and actually has been for a number of years. So Paul, take it away.
Thank you, thank you. I'm just going to try,
There you go.
I think I'm there.
You are indeed.
Is that satisfactory?
Yes.
Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Kate, for the introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'd like to obviously mirror what the Vice-Chancellor just said. Not being a full member of the university anymore, it's a very exciting, sounds like it's going to be a very exciting place to be. Just in bearing in mind the comments that the Vice-Chancellor just made, I found this as a quote from the website this morning. It was looking at and exploring the problems that the universities themselves will have to engage in. And we can see here that for me, those multiple trades, those multiple realities, those multiple skills are not simply a blending together of individual skills. They need a radical change, a radical shift in the ways in which we understand who we are, what we are, and what knowledge actually means in these issues. And so I can see that transdisciplinarity is central to the ways in which we address these bigger pressing problems and addressed in a completely different way. The slide here gives you an idea of how interdisciplinary, it was too difficult to find enough academic papers on transdisciplinary publications have grown. It's quite clearly the issue of single disciplines has not met some of the challenges this world presents to us. I think on a recent count, there were something like 8,000 new disciplines. And this is really somewhat of a growth from the 4 disciplines which were embedded in the University of Paris when it first started in engaging in its higher education scholarship.
Paul, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to move your slides. Your slides are still on the first one.
I did move it. I'm on the second one. It's in front of me.
No, it's on the screen. It's just on the first one.
Well, I don't know what to do then.
So there should be a little icon below that.
No, there's full screen.
Well, if you put it on slideshow, it should work.
How about that?
There you go.
Okay, so I won't go. So there we are. So what I'm chatting about here is this slide here, which looks at how the interdisciplinary work has increased in its level of publication. You also see, and on both the left and right hand side, are 2 famous philosophers, both of which share, I use those basically because they both share an interest in philosophical anthropology. And that was, I doff my hat to Kate on that. Heidegger is probably the last significant German philosopher to discuss the fine sciences. For him, the fine sciences are those that are related to the transcendentals, related to our understanding what is good, beautiful, and truth. And on the right-hand side, we have Immanuel Kant, who was much more interested in the higher sciences. And these are the sciences that take their meaning from a scientific method. In his critique of judgment, he argued that it was only those sciences, only that knowledge which could be revealed through a scientific method, which should be justifiable. So we have both the beginning there of separating out value from our understanding, our epistemology, and actually arguing that for an expertise in a particular area. So that's a kind of, I think, a grounding of where we are. How things have explored, we saw the graph previously about how academic publications have increased. These books in front of you are the books that I just took down from Amazon that have been published the first 6 months of this year. So the interest in transdisciplinarity is enormous. One of the problems is that they all tend to be grounded still within a particular focus. And so this transdisciplinarity is only a methodology. It isn't a broader way of engaging with the world. And I'll just have a few words with you in a second about that. Because if we look here, where that, and I'll explain very briefly who these people are, that there is a transdisciplinarity in and of itself is spread and has different kind of approaches to the subject. On the left-hand side is Bazarab Niculescu, who takes a much more broader and philosophical approach towards transdisciplinarity. We've been fortunate enough to have Bazarab attend with us at the university. And then moving from Bazarab, we move through to Julie Thompson-Klein. She's an American transdisciplinarian, mainly though, linking together notions of disciplines and how we can cross borders and interrelate in multidisciplinarity. So you have on the one side a European model, which is much more holistic, much more philosophical, and a much more pragmatic American model. Sitting somewhere between those is Christian Pohl. Christian Pohl is probably one of the nicest men I've met, and is an important contributor to sustainable education and sustainable sciences. So we've got, and Christian Pohl is Swiss, Niculescu is Romanian, and Maria de Mello is a significant intellect in transdisciplinarity, and she works from Brazil and around the world. And then clearly the cutting edge work, which is being done by Kate, warrants her place amongst those other leaders of transdisciplinarity. What we have is those two kind of views can be, I think, illustrated in these two bullet point slides, or parts of a slide. There's the integration of knowledge, which I think the Vice Chancellor was implying, which is how the definition of concepts and theoretical frameworks are constructed from taking different disciplines, how we then formulate research questions and hypotheses which straddle those different disciplines. Then there's a development of an integrative approach, the design of assessment procedures, and the creation of mutual understanding across disciplines. All of that seems to me to be taking a step forward, but not a leap. It isn't a disjunct from our knowledge that and epistemological models that we still hold. I'm not arguing they're not valid, but I'm saying they're not good enough. And then we move to Homo Sui Transcendentalis, which is the approach that Niculescu and others would take, which is about the praxis of being. It's not about theory and practice, it's about theory in practice. It's about the substance that transdisciplinarity and all disciplines need to be reconsidered. It's like transdisciplinarity is the core, it's the substance from which the disciplines come. It isn't the gap between disciplines. Its revelations are based on uncertainty and complexity. It enables us to satisfactorily understand and act, but often not to know. And I think that's one of the things that we need to embrace in our own way in which we react, is that not all is knowable or revealable to us, and it can trouble our acceptance of others. So there we've got the kind of international views, the international leaders, they can cluster around those two camps of transdisciplinarity, and they do that through a huge number of activities. I've only listed a few here that came to mind fairly recently, but you can see that transdisciplinarity has centers and hubs across the world. Austria is particularly relevant for sustainability. Australia is the work of the UTS in Australia is about creative design and design products. Hong Kong has a very high understanding and relationship to transdisciplinary education. Romania, where Bazarab is professor, has a very interesting approach, and it looks at how transdisciplinarity and theology and spirituality can work together. Switzerland, we saw with Christian Pohl, does tend to focus on sustainability studies, which is a critical and common theme from all of these centres. Middlesex just does everything wonderfully. And then there's Arizona, Texas, and Harvard. But Texas tends to focus on engineering, for instance. So we've got this whole group of organizations that are developing transdisciplinarity, often in their own ways, but fundamentally making decisions of whether it can be additive of disciplines or whether it can transcend disciplines. And it's more of a not going above or going above, it's much more transcending in a transcendental role of transdisciplinarity. There are a number of key centers. There's the International Center for Transdisciplinarity in Paris, which does accept members and writes some really interesting work. That's where Basil Arb is, and that's the address that you're welcome to attend. There's a similar organization out of Brazil, which is a great hotbed of activity. I've had the pleasure of attending some of their meetings. There's the TDNet for transdisciplinarity. That's the Swiss setup. And then there's the Academy for Transdisciplinary Learning and Advanced Studies, which comes out of Texas. All of these also offer publications. Whilst all this is going on, and why this very important symposium is happening, there is also a Third World Congress of Transdisciplinarity, which you can find details out by engaging with the website and finding that. It was a physical Congress, but it's been converted over the whole year because of the pandemic. So for me, an international view of transdisciplinarity offers up a number of questions, and I hope that these will be discussed in your meetings. Now, what are the real differences between interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity, and why they're important? It seems to me that one is a progression and evolution, one is a radical change. Within all of that, we need to understand what we mean when we talk about knowledge and truth. We also need to understand what might practice and theory of transdisciplinary work to be, and how can we develop that in constructive and creative ways? What might the praxis of transdisciplinary look like? And really, it's just a step back. Well, would we know it before we see it? That seems to me to be the skills we need, is to be able to recognize how knowledge is, a whole range of knowledges, not those that are enshrined in disciplines, can reveal truth to us, which has important impact on the way in which we are. And how should we talk about these issues? I was talking recently to a prof from Cornell University, who was arguing that transdisciplinarity should find another description. It should drop the word disciplinary so that it doesn't become another discipline. It transcends those whole notions. Two more slides. The one is this gift. I mean, if you've managed to stick with me this long, this is a book I wrote with a colleague from Australia last year. It includes a section which focuses on Kate, but it also focuses on some of the 10 most important transdisciplinarians in the world, in my view. If any of you are interested in receiving that, I do have PDFs, and so hence the gift. If you'd like to contact Kate or any of her team, then I'm very willing to send the PDFs to you, and you get a 4 or 5 page portrait of some of the major figures in transdisciplinarity. And so I'd just like to close with this, really. Einstein said, we can't solve problems by using the same thinking we use to create them. And that seems to me to be a nice closing sentence for why the work that you're doing and the work that Kate and her team are doing in Middlesex are incredibly important. We have too many problems that we need to solve than to start from the place that we created them. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That was lovely. I'm still blushing from seeing my photograph up there.
All right.
So this is beautifully timed. And so now we can actually move into the sessions, which we're all very excited about. And so I'm going to hand over to our first host, Dr. Dave Adams, for the first session. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Paul. That image of Einstein makes me think he must have been in lockdown because his hair is as long as mine. But there we are. It's special to be able to meet like this. And obviously this technology does allow us to gather a very wide and diffuse community of people who are interested in this topic. It's my privilege to take us into the rest of today, really, and to introduce what we're going to be doing. And the emphasis of today is to think about and work together on understanding what it means to become transdisciplinary in our practice. The focus of this DProf program is on transdisciplinary practice in particular. And what does it mean for us to see an emergence of transdisciplinary ways of being and knowing in the world? And it connects very much to what Paul was saying and what before that Nick was saying. And we're going to explore it through the stories of students and alumni on the DProf program here at Middlesex. And there are 3 steps to this journey through today. Later, we're going to be hearing the experience of some of the students who are currently undertaking research in their context, and explore with them the tools and the way in which they're going about their work. And then towards the end of the day, we'll be hearing from people who have already graduated from this program and are taking this way of being and knowing out into their world. But we're starting with students who are just in the early stages of doing this DProf work. Over the past 3.5 years, 10 cohorts have joined this program. Small groups who work together in the early part of the program to develop an understanding of what it means to become a transdisciplinary practitioner. And in the next 40 minutes, we're going to be hearing from members of DPS 09, the group that started this program in October. And we've invited them to share some of their early reflections on the work, on what it means to become a transdisciplinary practitioner. One of the characteristics of this kind of program, of course, is that it attracts a very diverse group of people with very different background and experience, and for that matter, geographical reach. So this cohort includes people from the Middle East, from here in the UK, but as far afield as Brazil and Australia. And because of those different time zones, not everybody can be here in real time. So what they decided to do as a group was they would share with each other and with you a sense of their understanding of themselves as practitioners. And one of their members, Sarah Bell, put together this video, which I now invite you to watch.
Becoming transdisciplinary is an aspirational journey that has brought a cohort of students together to explore their own transdisciplinary practice through the Doctorate of Professional Studies at the University of Middlesex. It was Nicolescu who said that modern science was born through a violent break with the ancient vision of the world. It was founded on the idea, surprising and revolutionary for that era, of a total separation between the knowing subject and reality, which was assumed to be completely independent from the subject who observed it. And so maybe the launch pad to becoming transdisciplinary is unbecoming disciplined. Nicolescu also said that the death of the subject is the price we pay for objective knowledge. Yet outside of academic pursuits, the price may be even higher. When we unbecome disciplinary, we can see that there are complex problems in the life world that do not have an objective or one-dimensional answer. Even interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary approaches can struggle to adapt because without a transcendence of perspective, we can only achieve a competitive dialogue between disciplines when we need a collaborative one. For those who will resist to pay this price, an extended epistemology is appropriate to capture the richness, interrelatedness, complexity, and urgency of the life world. Once we break free from the way that knowledge ought to be, it opens exploratory opportunities and pathways into how knowledge could be based on how it behaves in the life world. Knowing is gained by learning, reflection, and practice from a lived experience. It's stored and used in systems that are designed to execute on particular assumptions about the world, and it's all dynamic and relative to political, social, ethical, and cultural contexts. Becoming transdisciplinary is about resigning your position as a spectator to the life world and occupying the dual states of being both researcher and practitioner at the same time. Kirsty Reynolds from our cohort currently undertaking this journey of becoming used these words to describe it. She says, a big part of being transdisciplinary is recognizing that I cannot do a research project outside of myself because I am inextricably the imagination and the process behind it. My starting point, therefore, is trying to understand why I see the world the way I do, my own layers of assumptions, and move beyond these bases so that I can create meaning that is meaningful for someone other than me. Let me introduce you to the rest of the cohort now. Welcome to one of our weekly DPS 09 Zoom catch-ups, where we meet to discuss, reflect, and challenge each other on our journeys to become transdisciplinary. The diversity of cultural background and professional experience in this cohort has led to a rich tapestry of experiences in becoming transdisciplinary too, and we'd like to briefly share our individual experiences of that journey now. We've chosen to express ourselves by focusing on an image that is personal and representative of our journey to becoming transdisciplinary, which to date has been an examination of self and practice.
All beauty is a making one of opposites, and the making one of opposites is what we are going after in ourselves. Elie Siegel. Simplicity and complexity need each other. The unity of opposites, where the existence of a situation depends on two opposites to each other, yet dependent on each other within a field of tension, is part of our daily life. I chose the Yin Yang Metaphor to represent my new journey of understanding the masculine and the feminine are not in competition. They are here to coexist through divine contributions of oneness, like day and night, the sun and the moon, to embrace a message for humanity about harmony and the oneness of opposites.
Hello, fellow students and members of the University of Middlesex, and welcome to the Interdisciplinary Practice Symposium. This presentation is a short introduction about me. Who I am. I am Tamer Ali. I work in the field of human resource management and training for 15 years. I have a Master of Science in Human Resource Management and Training from University of Leicester. I am currently a Doctor of Professional Studies degree student at Middlesex University. Why I am here. The university opened for me a gate into the interdisciplinary world, working with investigators from different disciplines and backgrounds to create new concepts and develop innovations, integrate efforts to address common problems. What do I want to do? My desire is to achieve my purpose in life by satisfying the ethical responsibility that drives my passion to make the world a better place. My research interest is about the transition phase between campus and corporate life, how to equip the fresh graduates with essential skills needed for success in the business environment. Which concept? Flexibility is my main concept in practice, the ability to rapidly respond to changing circumstances on individual, organizational, and governmental levels. Where to focus? The pandemic is the focus now. We need to reset our priorities and projects as the current situation worldwide is an urgent call for us to work together to find solutions for individuals and organizations.
This metaphorical image speaks to the paradoxes and contradictions within my own character and professional identity that have been shaped by training, upbringing, culture, and experiences. To describe my practice as a synergy between these two contradictory forces or characteristics of a lamb and a lion conveys the approach of participatory methodology with management and education. The lamb listens, observes, absorbs something of the realities, truths, and knowledges within my context. The lamb comes alongside to understand and accept. It does not impose a particular knowledge on others. It does with others, not to them. The lion takes this knowledge and understanding and uses it to speak out and champion, to pursue transformation. So these two depend on each other. The lamb is not as effective in bringing change as it takes the passion, vision, and courage of the lamb. The lion has a sense of purpose. As a transdisciplinary practitioner, there is a duality of seeking to understand others and appreciate other realities and complexities of an environment. But there is also a drive not to get so caught up in complexity that there is not an emerging vision or a requirement to negotiate with other disciplines to be able to allow an innovative response to complex problems to emerge. It takes courage, being able to accept dissonance, to make space for dynamic interaction.
This is the metaphor for my transdisciplinary practice, the image of two soaring birds. This speaks to me on a number of different levels. The first thing is the concept of a bird's eye view, where you can be above the disciplines. You can see the different knowledge silos and also cultures and borders and so on. But you're somehow beyond them and can see a more holistic view of their interconnectedness. For me, there's something in how a bird picks its flight path as well, its direction of travel, but then it's the air currents that guide and dictate the ultimate path the bird takes. And similarly, a transdisciplinary practitioner has his or her own agency and volition, but there's a situatedness to their experience, and the environment is not a static or permanent thing. Also, birds are part of a flock. So yes, there's a uniqueness and a completeness of each bird's flight path and experience, just as there is a sort of practitioner's craft or a practical knowing we bring to our work. But that uniqueness contributes to the collective, and it's embodied sort of in the interactions within a community of practice. This image also has a smaller bird, which to me signifies a child. And this represents the extended epistemology that children so readily encounter the world with. They have sort of less of a hierarchy of senses, and in accessing the world, children's means of acquiring knowledge and their range of being are extended in a way that we have to consciously work to replicate in our adult lives. And the two birds represent the mother and child to me. This is a completely non-transactional bond above the knowledge and utility economy in which we operate and live in. There are value connections and an epistemology here really that doesn't fit within the dominant ideology, and certainly these connections are not ascribed any value or any power. Finally, one last thing is to keep soaring. The downward air pressure on a bird's wings need to be met by an equal upward pressure. And in some ways, this speaks to what a wicked problem is. What do we meet the complexity of modern problems with? That downward pressure in some ways. How do we respond? as transdisciplinary practitioners.
Hello. Well, what is TD practice for me? Well, I can't define it only in words, because for me TD practice is not defined by its epistemological characteristics more than its phenomenological characteristics. So I think that the words have to have the responsibility in describing transdisciplinary practice to convey experience in themselves. So I have to here now live try to assess myself in this answer, and I have the help of these two images to do so, because, well, the first one is a piece I made with a friend of mine, and for me it stands for this respect for an emptiness and a sacredness, unannounced sacredness, simple, and a care and vulnerability and a delicacy needed in TD practice. And the other one is a piece I don't know by whom, but it conveys for me the complementary opposite. It conveys for me embeddedness, embodiment, connectedness, inseparability, and a meta dimension that also has its own deconstruction of a meta dimension. So it's live, it's in vivo knowledge or knowing, better said maybe. And well, I think that we are TD practice. We only have to treat it more rigorously, maybe in a shared sense, because the essence of TD practice doesn't come from the individual. It doesn't come from thinking about something and then doing something about what we thought. It comes from, it arises, it emerges from the between. It emerges from the connecting the dots of differences. So it is necessary another logic of relationships, another stance of relationships. And this is what I'm hoping to get in my doctorate and with my wonderful cohort.
My name is Sarah Bell, and I'm the co-founder of an artificial intelligence solution based in Australia and New Zealand. I've chosen this object, which appears to be a scientific symbol that is simple and restrained in design. I would like to attempt to express the complexity and transdisciplinarity that this simple object represents to me and my practice. The object is composed of two very simple lines, and when we separate those cross lines, we can see that those two elements of the object could not be more polarized from the other. Separated, they are two completely different objects existing in this binary and very distinct way. Even though the presence of the line is the same, there is a vertical state and a horizontal state. When the cross object emerges, the object exists in both states at the same time, a quantum state that harnesses the power of superposition. In the Nicolescu tradition of transdisciplinary practice, it emphasizes this quantum state, and for me, transdisciplinarity is about a practice that brings together different objects into a marketplace of understanding, not for eclectic curiosity, but for merging and the emergence of new knowledge, which is also represented by the plus sign. Symbolically, these cross lines have the ability to act as borders or barriers between knowledge sharing. But as a positive plus sign, this symbol also has the power to connect and combine knowledge from across and beyond disciplines. In artificial intelligence, which is my area of practice, we create sophisticated tools to solve complex problems that persist beyond traditional simple solutions and existing capabilities. The cross is also a powerful symbol of sacrifice to many Christians around the world, and as a lapsed Catholic, I think the sacrifice that we must be prepared to make or bring to transdisciplinary thought or collaboration is to yield on our individual assumptions and partisan perspectives in order to create space for new knowledge to network and emerge. As we find answers and tooling within the different disciplines, it creates entanglement. By transcending the constraints of how knowledge is typically generated and validated within these silos, we can create new knowledge that addresses real complex issues in the real world, maximizing function and augmenting the human experience. The journey to knowing in a transdisciplinary sense shakes off the two straight lines that we started with. Knowledge, once it becomes transdisciplinary, is networked, entangled, it's experienced, lived, it's a complex, knotty object that is also felt. The knotting of this knowledge and experience does more than add and combine knowledge. It transforms it to something more than the sum of its parts. The network continues to increase as more knowledge is added. It's richer, it's more robust and capable of solving the complex problems of the real world. While the disciplinary approach continues to deny the existence of emotion and identity, giving objective methodologies primacy, we can't hope to gain new knowledge that accurately and correctly reflects the complexity, the messiness, the chaos of the life world it's seeking to understand and solve.
Good.
And so Vicente.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Can we get ourselves off the spotlight? Can we go to gallery view so we can see everybody? No? Well, hello, everybody. This is my first facilitation in English, so I'll be kind to your ears if you'll be kind to my words, okay? Well, the first thing that we wanted to share is this who am I sense of transdisciplinarity. So I invite you all, I invite you all to open your cameras so we can assess ourselves first in our bodies. If you can sense your body right now, what your emotions are right now, your thoughts maybe. And now you can just go through ourselves, gazing through the cameras of everybody. Just having this sense that we are here together. What we look like, what these images, these expressions convey as a flavor of being together here right now. If we could smell this group, what would it smell like? What do we feel when we go by these faces, or even these names for those who have their cameras off? Well, this is a first attempt of conveying transdisciplinary meaning through experience, not only as concept. I'll now share our presentation. I hope you all follow with me open-heartedly. So first of all, there is this who am I part of realizing transdisciplinarity. But then again, the first thing is to exist. And this might come as a question firstly. Do we exist? So who is there to be a transdisciplinary practitioner in the first place? Are you in a head detached from your body and thoughts detached from emotions? Who are you speaking from as a system, a whole system? And then who are this we? The second stepping stone for us in our cohort was to realize we are a group. We are in this together. We have a collective identity, which is emerging, shifting, but also expressing itself in both potentiality and manifestation. And this is what I invite you all to feel throughout the symposium, that don't forget each other. It's not only a stage or a spotlight, but the potential of getting together. And this is what we are living in our cohort. We are this huge potential that becomes manifest, and in each manifestation reconfigures our potentiality. What I mean by potentiality is just our dreams, thoughts, symbols, stories, narratives, things that don't come by in concrete ways before they come by in subtle ways, subtle, not abstract, only subtle ways. And manifestation are the structures, the limitations, the boundaries, the forms that come forth in our identities, nurturing then differences. And differences and diversity are not something easy to grasp. So this dance of potentiality and manifestation that we are trying to encourage in ourselves, in the group. And from this arises some creative tension, of course, when different identities come together to be for each other, the dream and the structure, trying to dialogue. Of course, we have conflict as well as the opportunity to integration, given the TD attitude of openness, tolerance, and rigor. From this arises the living aspect of it. We cannot talk about transdisciplinary practice in our view if we don't reach for the living process in it of transformation. And this can also be seen as this toroidal movement of something that both goes upwards and downwards. It closes in and opens out. We have different qualities simultaneously, different qualities of getting there as a path, meeting the other, the differences, the actuality of it, and also meeting ourselves. These things happen together, metaphorically speaking, as like a daytime solar kind of learning, active learning, exchanging formal languages, concepts, but also at the same time, there is this lunar learning, this nighttime learning through serendipity and contemplation, for instance. And now comes the part that we need you to complete this quick description of transdisciplinary practice, because if it is trans, we have to set our path for beyond a plastic screen we are all staring at right now. So these are the images we harvested from our hearts when trying to talk about our experience in this doctorate so far. And we want to your help now to answer for us which words could connect these images. Now we have to change our environment to continue. So Dave now is going to share his screen, and I'm going to be there on the other side. Oh yes, we have to share the link with them, don't we, Dave? You can join us there in Miro. There's a QR code for those familiar. If not, you can just copy this link here. Dave, if you can please put the link in the chat room so everybody can be on it with me. But Dave, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm just looking for the screen. Here it is.
Okay, good. Nice. So we'll all meet here. And what is this? Is an environment for sharing ideas, images, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But what we can do here is just take these post-its, just click on it and let it go wherever you want. When you double click on it, you can write something in it, right? And this is your contribution, it would be, okay? What I want to invite you to do is to just take a look at these metaphors of our cohort and try to describe in words what would connect them in a way. You have to ask yourself this There's no right answer, only your perception of this. As soon as anybody would want to be here with us, we can just start doing this. I'll give you an example, for example, connection. I think it's something. Or maybe feel free to join us. Yes, Chris has begun. Kate is always there too. Who else would like to join us? This is your participation in our definition of TD practice. We have to be open to these interferences. If you would be kind enough to join and participate if you like. If no, it's okay. I think that contradiction is something strong in these images. There's dogs, Aggie. Okay, Dave put the link in the chat room for anybody that wants to drop in. Yeah, it's cool. Good, we have a couple of more there. Yes, excellent. Good. I think it's enough for now. Well, let's just contemplate it for a few seconds. So, Dave, can you rove above the word so we can see what's been written so far? I have a connection beyond totality, spirit, curiosity, incarnation, contradiction.
You can also go onto the menu on the left-hand column of Miro, and on the three dots at the bottom, you click on that, it'll give you an extended menu, and you can go to Google image search and drag your own images of transdisciplinary practice if you wish to. And the more you type into a sticky pad, the smaller the more text can be accommodated, and you can actually access the text on any individual one by just zooming it as I'm doing now. And then you can go back to the full image if you want to.
Thanks, Dave. So let's just admire the words. I'll take out the images for now, just separating the images here. If we only look at the words that you associated with our metaphors, what we get: humanity and connection, adaptability, sense of mission, totality, beyond, spirit, curiosity, incarnation, everything like this. An empty post-it, it's also meaningful. And now the last part of it would be, if you could imagine your own images through these words. So these words may convey some kind of meaning that becomes personal to you. If you want to use this last tool of thinking of a metaphor, reaching out for Google to get your image out of it, and then contributing to this word cloud with your own image, then the cycle would be complete. Because then transdisciplinary practice would be something that has gotten through the I, the we, and the you. And we have not defined it, but there's a strong sense of meaning through belonging, identity, participation, and difference. And this would be our contribution to this symposium. Dave, would you like to present this tool as a tool for the whole of the symposium?
Yes, thank you, Vicente, very much. And what we were thinking was that we would actually continue this process now as we go through the symposium, one of the things you can do with Miro, as you become familiar with using it, is you can continue to extend the board and add to it as you go. So what we'd like to do is to build up a web of ideas and images of our thinking about transdisciplinary practice and our inquiries into it. And at any time during this session or the next 2 days, feel free to come onto the board, add your reflections and comments, and over a period of time, we hopefully will get a really comprehensive sense of how collectively we understand this emerging practice. So please use the opportunity to do that. But we've got a few minutes left now, and I'm going to open it up for some discussion. So anybody who would like to be able to come on and perhaps talk to Vicente about his ideas, or any of the other members of the group and the comments that were made in their videos, feel free to come in and just indicate in the chat room that you'd like to be able to contribute, and we'll invite you in.
Dave, do you want to leave that on the screen, or do you want to continue to share the screen? No, that's okay.
We'll continue to share the screen because it's nice to see it, sort of the activity of it, and just sense the we-ness that that Vicente was talking about. Anybody like to make a comment or a contribution to this discussion?
Well, it's lovely to see all this action now in Miro. We have lots of participants coming together. This decentralized action, I think it's also an interesting characteristic of some moments of a TD journey. This collaboration. Nico's admitting everybody. Okay. Dave, you're not sharing your screen anymore, right?
Sorry, did I not do that? My apologies, I must have switched it off unintentionally. Apologies for that. But there you get a sense of what's developing on the screen as we share ideas.
As you all share your words, you can always share images too. For instance, one other metaphor I was thinking of exploring is the Moebius strips. Let me go back to Miro. Where is it? Moebius strip here, representing this unity of subject on object.
If you're not sure how to do that, Vincenti just grab that image by going to the Google image search at the bottom of the left-hand menu. Just click on that, as I've just done now. It takes you to Google image search, and you can go off and type in your search request. Okay, and then just drag it into the space.
Good. So you see, now we cannot say it any longer that this is DPS 09, but it is at the same time. And we have no control of what's going on, but we have a fairly intentioned coherence nonetheless. So what would we like to get this kind of setting into research? Or practice?
Well, that's our little image that Sophia has just added.
Oh, good.
And as we go forward in the symposium, please feel free to come back, and you could type a much more extensive note on these post-it notes. You might want to put a link to a reference, an article or a book that you have read, or anything else that you think could be helpful to each of us as we continue our transdisciplinary inquiries.
Well, this is what we offered as a little taste of our group and our ideas. I thank you a lot. I'm open for a conversation in these last few minutes if you want, but mission accomplished here.
So are there any final last minute comments from anybody in the symposium that they'd like to share? Just indicate in the chat room if you would like to say something.
I have a question.
Please,
Yes.
could you just say who you are?
I'm Neil Valentine from the University of Winchester. Question is how this board and your group, how things have played out for you, Vincenzo, in real kind of time. What have you got out of using this board personally for your practice and your group?
Well, our process was what we could do with very different timetables and availabilities. We have 4 working mothers in our cohort. So of course their availability is compromised in the pandemic, as is mine and Tamer's also, of course. But this kind of decentralized process of decision-making and trusting, this trust aspect was key for us to have the confidence to let go and just plan the next step as we went. And this tool there was familiar to Sarah that made the video and myself. And in my practice, it's a wonderful way of just inviting people to make their thoughts visible at the same time that something is emerging through an interaction. So this, I work with this tool a lot in very different kinds of settings, a workshop or maybe a consultancy or even therapy. If I want to work with images real fast, for instance, now that I cannot have my patient physically present, I can use this as an interface to get things in the between. It's like having a shared desk in this virtual space. And I think that the virtual space is also something to be talked about in TD practice now in the 21st century. What is the use of the virtual interface for TD practice? I think that's a very, very powerful theme. I don't know if I talked about what you wanted, Neil. Cool.
Yeah, I'm more interested, rather than specifically the tool, but
Okay.
your kind of experience, because it's obviously a very powerful tool, and you know we can Google it and whatever, but about your personal experience and the kind of what you've got out of the process personally, I guess.
Oh, this particular process, you mean?
Yeah, with your cohort, Yeah.
Oh no, it's excellent because we see all the roles emerging, not only to get to know what we ourselves think about stuff, but the ways we behave in relationships is also a source of diversity. And this thing today, I don't know, I'm really comfortable in doing things together. So for me, it's not, I don't feel it as a risk I'm taking. I feel it as actually a relief of getting to the connection part of transdisciplinarity, not making some real sophisticated thinking and talking about it, but actually reaching out to people and making them feel this fuzzy feeling of having a say in all of this. And we share belonging to this quest for change in knowledge production or anything else in our practice. So I think this tool is a good way to provide this interaction. But I loved it today. I wanted to see you all on Gallery View at the beginning. I think this would be good for us to have met a little better before. But other than this, I think the words are really powerful. Dave, do you want to make a tour, an updated tour of our words regarding transdisciplinary practice? You're muted. Still muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Let me just take us on, as Vicente suggests, just a short tour of the many things that are coming up in our reflections here. This will allow you to read it. Of course, you're just seeing parts of the image, and I'll just go back out to the wider image in a moment.
Mm-hmm. What I like to appreciate is that the absence of boundaries does not compromise coherence if we are connected. So togetherness is a sense of organizing uncertainty. It's still uncertain, but the togetherness of it makes it more resilient and creative then.
Many different ways in which we might derive a sense of meaning for ourselves from a collective exercise like this. Questions that it probably raises. And the unknowns that are in this image now that some of us are asking ourselves, well, what does it actually mean? What is that contribution? What is the significance of that contribution? Well, we're up to the end of our allocated time in the program. So while you continue to wander around the Miro board and add to it and see as it's posted, the encouragement is for us to keep this open during the rest of the symposium, for you to add images, reflections, ideas, so that over time, as we go through this session, we'll have a web of perspectives that really represent the collective we of this event. And I'd encourage you to go ahead and do that. But it's my pleasure first to thank very much DPS 09.
Dave, you're frozen. Dave? Okay, sorry. Dave is, we'll get Dave back in a moment. We do have to pause for a few seconds because we have to calibrate the recording. So we'll just take a few seconds before we move on to Aggie, but Dave, I hope, comes back because he was doing the introduction. If not, I will do it. So if we just take a few minutes, Christiana, do you want to do what you want to do with the recording now?
Thank you so much. All done. Dom's is assisting. Thank you.
Okay, great. So just seeing if Dave comes back, because our next session is with Aggie. And so Aggie, would you like to introduce your session?
Oh, yes, I think Dave just appeared.
That's fine. Well, that's okay. It's going to pass over to you anyway, Aggie. So you just go ahead when you're ready.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. And, I just wanted to thank all of you for your thoughts and your hard work, starting us off with discussions around what it means to be transdisciplinary, to become. And our current session is going to build on these discussions on how we might negotiate our own pathways. And what is special about this session, that this will be presented from the point of view of candidates who are halfway through our program. Molty has just started her research, and Alan is just about to start his research. I will let them introduce themselves, but before that, may I invite all of you to bring out any pieces of Lego that you have lying around in the house, or perhaps your cohabitants have lying around in the house. So feel free to just move about, grab these pieces of Lego. If you don't have any in the house, or they are inaccessible at the moment, then please feel free to use some paper, pen, pencils for this next session. And also remember that we want these sessions to be interactive, so we very much would like you to contribute. Feel free to use the chat, or if appropriate or possible, enable and disable your microphone to interact with us. Now, without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Malti and Alan to introduce yourselves and just take it away.
Great, thank you, Aggie. I'm sure my colleague and co-presenter Alan is on the call. Alan, I don't know if your camera is on. I can't see you, but I'm sure you are. Aggie is nodding. So, hi everyone.
I can see you on screen, Malti.
Great, great. Thank you, Alan. I'll start off by introducing myself. I'm Malti Varshney. As Aggie kindly introduced myself, I have just cleared my PAP and about to start my research study. In my job, I do. My official title is Director of Clinical Networks in London. I work as part of the National Health Service. For those who are familiar with the health services in London, it is a national health service, which is a public service aiming for providing health services free at the point of access to all its population. So I'm going to hand over to Alan to introduce himself before we get into to our discussion. Alan, over to you.
Thanks, Malti. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my name's Alan. The short version of this is that I'm an academic librarian. And I've been an academic librarian now since 2000, so coming up 22 years. And as well as the obvious stuff academic librarians do, I have tried to kind of diversify a little bit into more, what I consider to be slightly more interesting areas, more esoteric areas, I guess. And one of the qualifications that I've got, and I use the word qualifications, is that I am actually a Lego serious play practitioner. So, so I win, basically, because I have a qualification in playing with Lego, particularly in an educational setting. So that's kind of what is going to inform what I'm going to talk to you about this afternoon, because it informs my research that myself and Malti are going to go on to discuss for the next sort of 40 minutes or so. Malti.
Hi, Alan.
Hello. Are we going to ask people to go away and find something now?
Yes, I think Aggie did ask them to do something, but yes, go ahead.
Okay. Here's what we'd like you to do. We'd like you to get up now, basically, and go and explore your space. I'm going to set a time limit on this because otherwise people will overthink it. Here's what I'd like you all to do. Obviously, if you don't want to do this, no one's going to make you, okay? You're all grown up. You make your own decisions. But what we would like you to do is in no more than 2 minutes, we would like you to go away from where you're currently sitting to your immediate environment and find your favorite thing that is soft. Okay, you've got 2 minutes. You need to get up, you need to go away, and if you're going to show what you're going to bring back that's soft, you will absolutely need to put your cameras on. 2 minutes, your favorite thing that is soft. Go. If this yeah, this competition's over, frankly. Okay, I didn't know you were going to do that.
No, I didn't think I was going to do that, but there we go.
Okay, fine.
He's enjoying the symposium very much.
That is a great face. Okay, is there a way we can look at everyone's screens at once? Would that be possible, so we can actually see what everyone's bringing back? Because obviously the kind of sharing aspect of this is kind of the point, really.
I think each individual can change their setting to gallery view.
Okay.
Right corner. So we can each have many icons on the screen.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. This is why I do this job. Okay, 1 second.
Get Alan.
Okay, so because this is clearly not a competition, we've established right now this is not a competition. This is Ray. This is my 6-month-old Labradoodle puppy. Say hello, Ray. Yes, he's quite used to. He's getting used. Okay, so what have we got on screen, everybody? Mandy, what's the name of your dog?
He's Arnie. He's Arnie. He's a Yorkshire Whippet.
Oh, very beautiful. Laura. Is it? Can you just hold that up a little bit further? Is he your favourite blanket?
It's not a dog, I'm afraid. It's a quilt. It's a quilt that I've made.
It's a quilt. Oh, lovely.
It's one of my sanity projects.
Oh, very nice too. Is that a lockdown project?
Yeah. I was going for some sanity, so I thought fabric was a way to go.
Carol Costley, can I just ask what you're showing us there?
Cake.
Cake. It's tremendous. Thank you.
Homemade.
Homemade. Carol, I never thought otherwise for a single second. Fantastic. I wish we had time to look at absolutely everyone's. Thank you for everyone that did that. And thank you for not just immediately logging out and thinking this has been hacked by lunatics. So thank you. Okay, I guess we need to move on. We promised we would not spend 35 minutes just looking at fluffy things on screen. Well, that went. I spent a lot of time since lockdown basically looking down this webcam at students that refuse to interact with things. So thank you very much for taking that in the spirit with which it was intended. Malty, what are we going to say next?
So what we're going to be doing is we did think about how do we share our experiences with colleagues who are on this symposium. What we decided that we're going to, Alan and I only met a week or so ago.
Yes,
very recently. We have had maybe 2 further discussions. So we are on a journey of finding out about each other as well. And so we thought that we will have a conversation about our research projects, where we are, how we feel in front of you, as if we have just met for the first time in a cafe. We don't have time to go and get a coffee for each other, otherwise I'll be held up in the queue. So here we go. We're going to just start off and getting to know about each other, about our research, and hopefully as process through our journey, we will be able to share our experiences with you as well. So Alan, would you help me understand your research study? What is it about?
Okay, so it started because I was cross about something, as a lot of research questions tend to. It started with a frustration. In my case, it was frustration with the concept of learning gain. Learning gain came out of, I think this actually came out of America, but what it is very broadly is the concept of what's all the stuff that students learn apart from the actual grade side of it. So what else do they get from higher education? In school, this tends to be known as the value added, but in higher education, learning gain seems to roughly be the kind of agreed term for this, for all these areas. And my frustration came largely because the early large investigations trying to measure learning gain were little more than extensions on the NSS, the National Student Survey. And that kind of just frustrated me more because I felt like the metric was very, very brutal and very reductionist, and it treated all students the same. So I started to trying to think of a way of exploring learning gain in a far more personal way with a small group of students. And that's when I had the idea of incorporating my Lego qualification, Lego Serious Play, and somehow using that to investigate learning gain. And the way Lego Serious Play tends to work, very briefly, for any of you that have done this, you'll kind of know this stuff already, but for anyone who hasn't done Lego Serious Play, you basically get the opportunity to use Lego to build ideas. You build feelings, you build your perceptions of something. And that's broadly what I intend to do with students still. I'd like them to build their thoughts and feelings about learning, about what they've experienced, about their well-being, about their resilience, all those other things that go together to make higher education worthwhile. How was that for an answer?
What do you hope to achieve out of your research is the different ways of learning and add to the knowledge base? Is that what you hope to achieve out?
Yes. What I'm hoping is in the course of them learning about themselves, they will learn how they learn. They will learn about why they learn very, very broadly, but they'll learn all those other things about themselves which make learning easier or harder over the course of those 3 or 4 years.
Great.
Because I don't think that reflective element of learning gain can really be explored just via a tick box questionnaire.
Right. So, and at what stage are you of your research?
I have just sent my final PDF to Dave Adams, who I'm sure is reading it with tremendous enthusiasm right now. In fact, why isn't he doing this right now? Why he's doing this seminar is astonishing, because what you should be doing right now is clearly reading my research.
I've done it already.
You're too good. You're too good. And then my PAP is actually next month. My PAP is 21st of April. So I'll be prepping for that over the next few weeks.
And I'm not an academic, but those colleagues who are academics on this call, what kind of methodology are you thinking of applying to it?
So by methodology, the transdiscipline aspect of this, I guess, comes from me trying to meld together Lego Serious Play as a method with visual ethnography as a method. Now, I'd never studied visual ethnography before this. This is actually quite a recent aspect of my research. And I've been devouring the work of Sarah Pink, who is a big leading light in this area. Because, and you know, you may have heard of this or you may not have, there's been a bit of a health issue going on in the world the last sort of year or so. And ideally, when I actually was at a stage of doing this about 2 years ago, in fact, the ideal arrangement for Lego Serious Play is you stuff a load of students in quite a small room, ideally within touching distance of each other, and then you give them a load of Lego and you ask them to build some things. That's kind of frowned on at the moment, unsurprisingly. So I will actually be doing my research now virtually across screens. So that's a big unknown aspect of this as well. And what I will be doing is, hopefully, assuming the PAP goes smoothly next month, I will then be rapidly coming up with some pilot sessions, and I will be physically sending Lego to students through the post and learning how we can do this via the screen.
And how did you decide on that this is how you'll conduct your research? Did you use anything specific, or did you just wake up one morning and said, yeah, I'm going to do it this way?
I love Lego serious play aspect of what I do. It is my favorite thing I've ever done as a librarian, I think, because it's so chaotic. It's so random. It's so wonderfully all over the place. And I love the fact I can't control it. That really, the students come up with their own. We have a plan. There is a plan. So there is always a structure to the sessions. There's always a plan to what I'm going to ask them to build. And typically, I have actually got some pictures of this that I would quite like to share if I can. But we need to get onto your research in a second, Marcy, because I'm aware of the fact that it's been all me so far. But the chaotic aspect is one of the things I love. There is a plan, but the plan has to be flexible because the learning comes from the students. This is very not what librarians are supposed to do, typically, traditionally. Librarians show people things on screen and then say, go away and do that because I know more than you. Lego serious play is kind of one of the things I love about it is that it's the antithesis of that in many ways, in that it assumes that participants, because I do this for staff as well, it assumes that participants already have knowledge about themselves within them. They already know stuff. They just need a conscious way of bringing it to the surface. And Lego serious play provides that opportunity.
Great, that's so helpful. And I've already secured my session with you after the symposium.
Yes, you have. We've already established that I'm absolutely going to do a one-to-one session with Malti over screens, or hopefully in person one day. Wouldn't that be lovely?
Great. So,
I have a question for you.
Yeah, go on then.
I would like you to describe your project, but I would like you to describe it as if I am a 10-year-old boy.
Okay, so my first
an average 10-year-old boy, not a smart 10-year-old boy, an average 10-year-old boy.
But you're still Alan.
Yeah, if you like.
Alan, yeah.
10-year-old Alan, yeah.
Yeah. So, Alan, tell me, how are you getting your classes? You're not able to go to school at the moment. How are you getting classes?
No, we're not playing that game. You tell me about your research.
Oh. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, good, because something happened to my laptop on that minute. No, but that generally, it's part of the answer to the question. I know we mustn't ask question on question, but generally tell me, you're a 10-year-old Alan in the middle of a pandemic. How are you getting your schooling done?
I'm doing very well.
No, how are you
I'm doing everything I'm asked to do, and I'm doing it via a laptop.
Via a laptop. So, for your teachers to be able to deliver a lecture, a lesson to you, a maths lesson or English lesson online, there is a lot goes on behind in terms of the preparation. In normal times, as in if we weren't in a pandemic, you would be going to school, head teacher would be there, your teachers would be planning all the work that you do, and then you will have your lessons delivered, you'll have session in the library as well, where you'll be able to get your books, that you'll be able to bring home your homework, you'll have all of that. All that planning, somebody is doing that planning to make sure that if in your school you had 2,000 children coming to school, that every child is able to get what they should be able to get. In my research, what I'm doing is working behind the scenes to make sure that during this pandemic, all the patients, our population, City of London, patients who need care, either in hospital or in their GPs, with their GPs, or at their home, whatever decisions that are being made to ensure that they get the care, my job is to bring them together, make coordinated decisions to ensure that that care is provided, like your lessons are being provided online. And the research that I'm undertaking is the decisions, how we make those decisions to ensure that we don't, those decisions are done properly, they are done in a very coordinated manner. What goes on in that process of doing that? That's what my research is about. I'm trying, my attempt would be to understand and study that process of decision making, of how the care should be, how the decisions are made for the delivery of care. Does that answer the question?
It does, thank you. Can I be 54-year-old Alan again now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have a question which I hadn't prepared to ask you, but a follow-up from that. How would you define what is a good decision?
So a decision could be if we were to change a pathway that was during the COVID, during pandemic, and what was being provided before COVID. So for example, renal care for dialysis for renal patients. If we were to make any changes across London, how do we do that? That is what my, that would be classified as a decision.
Okay. And what's your method?
So the
methodology, I should say.
So my methodology is action research. I'm going to be undertaking 2 cycles of action reflection. And as part of that, I will be having a dialogue with my my peers, my seniors, to understand how the decisions have been made, were made, what can I learn from it, how should we improve the process. So that would be my action reflection, would be my action research is my methodology.
And is there anything particularly attractive about action research as a investigative tool?
Very much so. But before I get to answer that question, I have to share with you that my background as a clinician, I'm very much quantitative, and before I settled on this way of doing my research, I was, whilst in my practical life, my day-to-day work practice, I would look at various options and then make the best decision. However, for my research, I was quite clear in my head, I'm going to do a questionnaire, I'm going to understand the things, and that would be my doctorate. That's how I'll conduct my research study. And it was many paths to life, and one path to doctorate is how it was described to me very recently. And that was so true. However, as I have learned more about the methods, I have understood myself more. I realized that as a practitioner, if I was to explain my practice in one word, it's service improvement, and that requires action. And by nature, I'm a very action-oriented person. And therefore, this method, this way of doing things really appeals to me, because it involves me bringing myself to this, me bringing out of others what is in them for them to offer. And together we create the picture that we have to create moving forward. So that's what appeals to me.
I guess that is broadly one of the differences between quantitative and qualitative. That might be a false dichotomy, I'm not sure, but I think it's difficult to do qualitative research of any sort without bringing some of yourself to the party.
Yes, very true. But I think part of it is being a practitioner research, you bring more of yourself into it, although and you have to declare that, because you have to declare your biases into it. And you can't always adjust for your biases, but as long as you're aware of it. And I think that's what we learn about the self, and we are able to then start looking into, am I introducing my own bias here, and how can I move away from that bias? And that is another thing that really attracts me about this, because I'm reflecting all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm having many moments, many aha moments where I think I am a bit more aware of myself, and I can quickly understand, okay, hold on a second, is there an ego playing here, or is this something that I need to do it? Or if I've made a decision, why am I feeling uncomfortable about it? It's about understanding myself a bit more. And that's the beauty of undertaking this way of doing research.
Okay, thank you.
So shall I ask you a question now?
Please do.
Or you want to carry on?
Let's do one each.
Okay, and then I think we need to open up and ask some of our colleagues on the call this question. So tell me about how do you keep yourself motivated to keep on going?
Probably a grinding fear of failure, I find, helps. But actually, I mean, I actually had a health issue a couple of years ago, and I had to step away from the project for a while. That probably tested my resolve to carry on with this more than anything else that's happened so far. And I guess it's a kind of natural resilience, you know. I mean, sometimes I say to students when I'm seeing them, and they're struggling with their own research, sometimes I say, absolutely the right thing to do is turn your machine off and go outside. You know, knowing when to quit in the short term is quite a skill, and it's not a skill that researchers have, in my experience, particularly well. What we tend to do is if we're not getting anywhere, we just sit at the desk until something happens. And I think actually, when I get stuck, when I get stuck, or if things are difficult, or if I want to quit, actually doing nothing for a couple of days kind of works for me. Taking a short break from something and doing anything other than reading about playfulness, Lego serious play, visual ethnography, I find it actually what then brings me, it kind of just refuels the tank. And then when I decide it's time to come back to the research, I'm motivated all over again. But personally, I don't tend to grind through. I find that doesn't work for me. Yourself?
I've actually, just before I answer, I've also posted a question for participants to put in there what keeps them going, because Brilliant. I think really we can learn from each other as well.
Absolutely.
So what keeps me going is I think it's my hunger for knowledge. So I think I have covered the distance in my DProf journey enough that I now don't want to look back, and my hunger to just understand a bit more, keeps me going. That doesn't mean I don't get tired in middle of the pandemic whilst doing my day job. I have continued to do this, and work pressure, time pressure. There are on many occasions I've thought I need to pause, I should pause, I can't carry on. However, the hunger for understanding more, as if it's like a piece of addictive jigsaw puzzle in my head that I have to keep putting the pieces together because I want to see what the whole picture would look like. Yeah. So I get tired, but I then go back to the puzzle keeps me going. That's what keeps me going.
There is genuinely a less glib answer, I guess, which I really should also back up what I said before, is actually I really want to give students the opportunity to have these experiences. And I think by pursuing the approach that I'm taking, I want to be able to evidence that this approach can work. And it's not just about, banging out questionnaires to the thousands of people. We need to treat these people as individuals with all their backstories and foibles and failings, and make them feel worthwhile as well. And actually that's the more serious point behind the other point.
I tell you what, the other thing that keeps me going is because it's my work-based project. Sometimes I feel I should do it, and I need to because I can add value to it. I can add value to my own work. I can add value to my practice, which I know I am. So that also keeps me going because it is a work-based project. Yeah.
There are some great comments, by the way. Aggie, are you checking the comments?
I am. Do you want me to summarize some of them?
Yes, yes, please.
Thank you.
So I think people really liked your question of, what keeps you going. And I think, everybody who's in the middle of doing quite a complex project can relate. So please keep those comments coming. I think, someone mentioned that their research involves food. So every time they eat, they think of that. But actually there was another theme of saying that their research is closely aligned with their work, which they find helpful in keeping things going. Fear of failure, respect for others who underpin and inform their professional practice. So I think there's probably a community element there. A desire to want to learn about themselves in context of the broader world.
Yeah.
I wanted to learn more about their practice.
Yeah, great.
Thank
great.
you.
Okay, so I've talked a lot. Alan, do you want to get to know any more about my research?
I would. What I'd like to know. There's a couple of things actually. When we were having a meeting with Dave the other week, he described you as being transgressive, and we both quite enjoyed the notion of being transgressive, I think. My question to you is, do you feel transgressive?
So do you know what? Aggressive, to me personally, gives a bit of a negative connotation to it. With kind of aggressive, I would say I'm passionate. I'm not aggressive. I'm passionate about what I do, and if I take it in, give it that look to it, I would like to kind of describe myself as transformative. Ever since I started my journey, as I said to you, I was quite blinkered in my thinking. This is the way I need to do. This is what I will do. But as I have went on this journey of doctorate, I have felt an internal transformation, and that transformation has come in terms of being more aware of things. When I am in meetings, I'm more aware of myself. I'm also more aware of my participants, my colleagues who are there. And there have been many occasions where I have had a lot of aha moments. And in fact, I had that aha moment when Nick was talking after Kate, and Nick said a few things about the learning and how transdisciplinarity, this way of learning, how that adds to the practitioners. And my aha moment was, I am in my trade, one of my skills is about quality improvement. And I have been doing quality improvement almost entirety of my career, which is coming up to 30 years in the health service now. And I continuously improve. We use, tools such as Plan, Do, Study Act or other quality improvement tools. And what I'm doing as part of my research, I'm just bringing that together with other disciplines now. And that's what I'm trying to amend my practice. And I'm on a continuous improvement journey for my own practice. So to answer your question, do I feel transgressive? Yes, I do feel transgressive in that way, because I am coming out of my disciplined boundaries of my own discipline, of my clinical, I'm a public health practitioner by background.
Yeah.
Of that discipline, I'm kind of crossing those boundaries into other disciplines and dealing with the complexity and making some sense of the complexity.
Okay. There's a kind of follow-up to that, which I'd be interested in, because this goes hand in hand with what you were saying about changing ideas, I guess. And actually, I think this would be a good question to throw out to the audience again. So if you'd like to answer this via the chat, it would help me and Malti as well. Again, it's good to share. Do you think, Malti, that you get, and to everybody, do you think you get more out of research if it doesn't go smoothly?
Yeah, and I say yes myself to that. Is I was actually thinking about my own career journey a couple of days ago, and I was thinking the approach that I have taken to my professional development is from some episodes I learn something how to do, and from some episodes I learn how not to do, and then some episodes how I learn how differently I can do. So, like the quote that we had from Einstein, that you get what if you do it one way, you get things out of that. And that is the essence of the service improvement anyway. So there have been many episodes where I have learned things by not doing the way I had set out to do it and being completely derailed. What about yourself, Alan?
I'm actually going to echo what I saw Alex Pitt wrote a few seconds ago, which is it's nice if it does go right. In my experience, I'm still waiting for it to go right, if I'm honest. I'm still waiting for any of research I've ever done to go smoothly. And if I'm honest, I don't really expect it to go A to B to C anymore. What I expect it to do is, I need a different metaphor. I don't expect to go on a straight road between 2 points. What I expect now is to end up in the woods with my torch running out of batteries and suddenly realizing I'm surrounded by wolves and not knowing where north is. I guess I've become comfortable with that feeling of being lost because I've been lost before, and I've managed to get to where I need to be, but it's never in a straight line. So I guess that's sort of how it feels. I have to talk to students about this with my librarian persona, with my kind of mainstream librarian persona in place. I often have to tell students that it's all going to be okay. I often have to remind them that actually not knowing what they're doing is fine. If they, because it'll happen. They will learn stuff and they will get to, and they will, they'll get to an endpoint and they will graduate. When you're in that position yourself, of course, it does feel quite different. But I do trust myself now enough to feel like I am going to get to some kind of endpoint, even if it's not the end point that I imagined 2 or 3 years beforehand.
Great. And I think we are getting some fantastic comments in the chat as well. Floundering seems to be part of DProf, very much so, a feeling that I have all the time. And then another academic has said, it's about part of daily life. And I so agree. Agree that, research is part of daily life. It feels like that we are undertaking research all the time. So I completely agree. Great, some really good comments.
That's a great point. But being surprised is spur to carry on. Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great. If you already, it's the old cliche about if you already know the answer, why ask the question in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant. Aggie, are we okay for time? How much have we got?
Yeah, maybe 5 more minutes.
Okay, great. So anything else that you'd like to know, Alan, about my research?
I would I'd like to know, this is a very broad question, but I think it's an important one in the context of the next couple, the last today and tomorrow. What does transdisciplinarity mean personally to you?
So,
what's your experience of it?
So do you know what? I could give you a really academic definition to it. And what we learned, on the board, the interactive board, the things that were going on, I could relate to majority of those statements: the curiosity, the challenge, the complexity, the polarity. And I think, to me, transdisciplinarity is, personally, if I was to describe it in one word, then I would say transformative.
Okay.
I feel that as part of doing this doctorate as a transdisciplinary doctorate, the transformation that I feel as a practitioner and how that has and continues to improve my own practice is transformative to me. For all the reasons that I have initially described. So I would say transformative. Transformative is what it means to me.
Thank you.
So tell me one thing from because we are running out of time shortly. One thing that I would love to hear from you is, if you were to share one learning to date from your doctorate, from your research, what would you share with us?
The need to be playful, the need to stay playful, and actually, I do genuinely love I love the feeling of being on the edge of my own ignorance. Actually, I do like the idea of always being on the the learning equivalent of a cliff, I guess, because I haven't always been a librarian. I haven't always worked in AG. This is still relatively new to me. I'm really a landscape gardener. I'm kind of hiding out in higher education, but really I'm a landscape gardener. But it's the need to bring playfulness to it. It's the need to if that keeps it fresh to you, if that playfulness and it's not about theories of play or all the kind of heavy stuff. It is about it's about the sort of hand-in-hand nature that playfulness and creativity creates together. It's the kind of, I guess it's sort of, and that goes, for me, that goes so hand in hand with the nice feeling of not knowing quite what I'm doing. I've become very comfortable in the last sort of 20 years or so of not feeling like I always know what I'm doing. But it's a trust exercise with yourself and with your audience.
Yeah.
And actually, the LSP part, one of the things I love about the LSP stuff, and I think I said this sort of earlier on, is that I don't have to provide the answers. What I have to do is give them the forum to interrogate their own thoughts and interrogate their own motivations, and just give them bricks to do it. And they come up with stuff, and they always do. The amazing thing is, they always do. Even people that think, they literally walk in and go, "What the hell is this? I am not a child. I am not playing the toys." It doesn't matter, because if you can keep people in the room for that first 20 minutes or so, they then can see the physical benefits, and they are the most intense learning experiences I have ever witnessed. Which sounds big, I know, and that sounds maybe sort of slightly hyperbolic, but it's true. In my experience, it's true.
I guess that is what I would define as transformative.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Okay.
Thank you.
Brilliant. So, Aggie, we can carry on if you would like us to, because we have so much to catch up on, as we don't know each other, but we'll be guided by you in terms of the timing.
I was thinking, should we invite some questions from other participants as well? Because it was absolutely fascinating listen to you to kind of tease out your understandings and just learn through conversation about your projects. But I was wondering if others also have some questions, or comments, or advice. Feel free to type in the chat or if you can enable your microphones.
Have we got time for me to show my painting, Aggie?
Yes.
One of the things I did as part of trying to work out how I felt about what happens in the room with Lego Serious Play sessions. I started painting a few years ago. I'm an enthusiastic amateur. I was going to show a picture of this, but I thought, nah, do you know what? I can actually show the canvas, which is easier. This to me is a representation of what a Lego Serious Play session happened. What happens in the room between participants. I'm not going to do an explanation about this, but I would absolutely encourage people to come up with, you know, creative or silly or playful ways to express how you feel about your projects. Some of you, I'm hoping, are doing this already, and I suspect I'm sure some of you already are. I love the pictures that were up earlier on from the previous session, by the way. But that's me. That's my representation of a Lego Serious Play session. Thanks, Aggie.
Well, thank you. I think, you know, my takeaway message from this session is this freedom. You know, I feel kind of freed to be creative and experimental. I liked how we started with holding up our soft things, which in many cases, it was a pet. And, you know, they are doing a great service to all of us. Thank you, Kate, during this pandemic and the lockdown to keep us going. And I was really encouraged by your conversation to hear how you are learning to live in these liminal spaces where you're not sure how things are unfolding, but you're driven by your curiosity and playfulness to keep going and keep exploring new things. So thank you very much for that. I think we are coming to the end of our time. I don't know, Ellen or Malti, if you have any final comments, final parting comments for us to take with us.
Over to you, Malti.
So my final comment is those who have just started the journey, keep going. Those like Alan and I who are in the middle of the journey, don't give up, keep looking ahead, moving ahead. And those who have completed this journey, you are our inspiration and role models. So thank you for completing that journey. Thank you, Aggie.
Right, Alan, do you want to have any final comments?
No, I can't put it any better than Malti did then. That was perfect. That was perfect. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks, a huge thanks for both of you for sharing your thoughts and feelings. And now I would like to hand over to Nico, who will introduce the next session.
Yes, thank you, Aggie. I think we need just time to change over with the recording and the change of speakers, but I'm very much looking forward at the next session with Catherine Dowing, Richard Pipers, and Alastair Weil. I will tell you a bit more about them in a second. Okay. So I'd like you to introduce the speaker for this session. Have here on my screen, I was almost going to say in front of me, Dr. Alastair Weil, executive and team coach, and also facilitator of leadership and organizational development and an action researcher. Dr. Catherine Dowing, coaching supervisor, executive coach and author, who has conducted research on small group supervision, and soon to be also doctor, also getting that title, Richard Pybus, 3-time Cricket World Cup coach director and designer of high-performance system for organizations. I enjoyed so much in the previous session that the dialogue and the interview between our two, Malti and Alan, and I think we're going to have a similar interaction between our three guests today. I know that all of them have a lot of things to say, and the challenge will be to govern all this wealth of insights within the time allocated, but we'll try. So the way we structure a bit the session today is that we're going to cover a little bit, the person behind the research and the position of the researcher in the process. What is the process and how they've reimagined their research and their practice through transdisciplinarity. So I think we agree that Catherine will make a start, and then Alastair and Richard, and we'll go from there. So over to you, Catherine.
Great, great. Well, it's wonderful to be here. I appreciate this opportunity. And the question really is my first person stance, right, as a practitioner and researcher. And as I look back on my journey, it was 5 years for me to have arrived at this point. I came in thinking I would learn a lot about others, and not surprisingly, I learned mostly about myself as well as others. And the real conundrum for me was how to take the expansiveness of transdisciplinary, all of the possibilities, all of the data from my research, the field text, if you will, since I did narrative, and compress it into a way to think about my practice, myself, and write about it. As the people who work closely with me know through this journey, I didn't want to compress anything. I wanted to look at 42 academic areas, and I wanted to look at all the data, and I could have written, I think, forever. And so as I think about my stance as in the first person, it was, what matters? What matters? It all matters, but what matters for me in terms of how I want to craft myself as a practitioner going forward, and how do I want to interact with the people who were so generous in spending a lot of their time with me. So I think the thing that I learned most is how to listen beyond my own story, how to listen beyond my own narrative, how to engage with others, to take the stance as inquirer of their own practice. And it has been just a fascinating journey. And I just want to go back to what Malti and Alan had shared with us about the surprise, if you will. And everything in my journey was a surprise, and that's not an overstatement. So let me hand off to Alastair. Over to you. I think you're muted, Alastair.
My action research thesis, Practicing as Inquiry, Developing Self as Practitioner, was an inductive first-person inquiry into my professional identity, ethos, praxis, autopoiesis as a leadership and organizational development practitioner. I drew some universal conclusions from reflecting on my unique experiences of who I am, how I am, what I care about, how I show up, and what I do in the world that makes me and develops me as the practitioner that I am. Through practicing as inquiry, I develop myself as a practitioner. Action research, according to Reason and Bradbury, is a family of practices of living inquiry in the service of human flourishing, whose quality is determined by its pragmatic usefulness, the extent to which it serves the needs of its inquirers to discern their own truth in working towards development and change. So as both the subject and agent of my inquiry, I put myself at the centre of what Eastman and Maguire think of as the narration of a working self, and at the heart of a deeper and more intensely personal process of discovering to read and write the self. As the narrator of my own self-story, I constructed storylines that integrated and gave meaning to all the critical events that have been part of my existence. I came to this doctoral inquiry seeking to notice how I practice and how I am as a practitioner in order to take experimental action for development. My intention was to support a shift of awareness and attention to what was already within me for self-development and transformation as a person and as a practitioner, working with my clients and in being of use in the world. My voice throughout my inquiry was that of a journeyman, both in the sense of being on a journey as I conducted my inquiry, but also in sense of being a jobbing practitioner inquirer, a performative bricoleur, someone who turns up, and makes do with whatever connects to my coachees and clients in relation to how they see their issues and their current situation. This was the essence of my professional self and my practice that tugged at my sleeve to be brought into the world.
Richard. Thanks, Alistair and Catherine. Alistair, that's quite something to follow. It was almost a poem. I will just humble myself down here for a moment. So my research over the better part of the last plus 2 years has been into my practice as a coach and a high performance director working in the sports industry. My subsector of the industry would be cricket. I'm expecting all those in the UK to have a semblance of an understanding. Those overseas in some of the other countries may not. Cricket is the second most participated sport in the world after football. It has a huge following in Asia, particularly in the subcontinent. To give you some context to my work, is quite often those who are either, number one, not interested or not particularly interested in sport, is with the scales of economy around leagues, is that the English Football League is valued at £9.1 billion, and recently the Indian Premier League, which is a T20 competition, which is only, I think, about 15 years old, is valued at 5 billion in 2019. So it's seen exponential growth. So that's a little bit of a context to my work. So as my work developed, or my inquiry into my practice, is I came to see my work as a coach and a high performance director not as a problem to be fixed, but really an inquiry into human performance and goal attainment. Goal attainment as a design process. And this is very clearly where I got to by the time I'd finished the context statement. I developed a process called agora, which is after the Greek word, which speaks to a public place. This is a public place for democratic decision-making. I was utilizing it in the sense as described by Alexander Christakis and John Warfield through the 70s and the 80s, who would have been at the inception of the TD field. It's very much an inclusive democratic design process. My personal work would have evolved through the early 90s, where very much I was at the center of that, and it was monodisciplinary in the sense that I was very much the expert, and I would say I was young in my practice. Once I got through the 90s, my work started to evolve into multidisciplinary practice, and I was now managing support staff, so sports scientists, players, and team managers. So I've got quite a large staff that I'm now managing, but we're still in line with our specialist field. By the time I got into the 2000s, particularly from about 2005 onwards, I was starting to migrate from interdisciplinarity to transdisciplinarity.
And what became very clear in the Agora process was handing over to those who participative team members, both specialists and performers, the design process of the attainment of an outcome or of a goal. And it became the most incredible journey where for myself, I stepped back from being the specialist and became a facilitator of a process of which I can only describe as the architectural design of goal attainment and achievement. So that's where I've got to. Got some great case studies, which I'll share when we get into the next section. Thanks, Nico.
Yes, thanks, Richard. So in this dance between you different practice, we're going back to Alistair, then back to you, Richard, and then going to Catherine. You're on mute, Alistair.
Okay, it obviously does that automatically, sorry. So in terms of my process, implicit in the reflexive infinity of forming my practice and being simultaneously formed as a practitioner by my experience of it, was the research frame that I was living life as inquiry in order to discover, interpret, and make a living theory of practitioner self-development. Living continually in process, adjusting, seeing what emerges, bringing things into question, my living theory was then inductively construed from the evidence and experiences of my life and my practice. Jack Whitehead's construction of a living theory, like Judy Marshall's stories of living life as inquiry, arises out of noticing and paying attention to life as it is lived and to practice as it is practiced. My evidence were the outcome data from my living inquiries. My experiences were realizations and revelations from the parallel process of writing as inquiry and its transformative effect on me as a practitioner. My inner awareness, relationally located within the social constructs of my life and times, is the totality of the knowledge and the know-how that I have to sense and respond. Such an extended epistemology, my experiential, presentational, propositional, and practical knowing allows me to account for my use of self in my practice and my sense of self as a practitioner. I used my own simple critical reflective practice that I often use with my coachees and clients to ground my reflexivity in the evidence and experiences of my practice data. How is it now? How am I with how it is now? How do I feel? What do I think? What am I doing or not doing about how it is now? And what do I want to do about that? Such a pragmatic reflection in action is what William James termed radical empiricism, double-barreled in having both content and reference to how its content is perceived. Experience is not just the data and the sequence of what happens, it's also the significance of how I'm impacted by what happens. So it's from such radical empiricism that I interpreted, discovered, and made my actionable knowledge. And in turn, it's from my actionable knowledge that I resourced and harvested my ongoing practicing as inquiry.
I think actionable knowledge is a great bridge to Richard. Back to you again, and then Catherine.
Thank you. So the evolution of my transdisciplinary process, which I alluded to just now, was that the performers and the staff would become one overarching team. And they'd participate in the Agora process. So we'd pretty much start with, for want of a better expression, a blank canvas or a blank piece of paper. And we would, and in this process, everybody's involved, and it's explicitly inclusive. And we would work backwards from what the goal looks like. And so rather than focusing on a problematique, we are looking at what is the design of the outcome which we're looking at. And we would design every aspect of performance, both from the technical skill side, the strategic, the physical capacity, the mental, the mental side of performance, the performance management side, as we would look at, a little bit like in the Olympic cycles, is that we would have to design performance to deliver perhaps on a single evening in a 4-year cycle where you can't afford to get it wrong. And what we do in this design process, and we typically take probably half a day to 2/3 of a day, while we would flesh out what this design looks like. And we would populate it, we would learn it, we would test it over and over and over again. And I see it very much as a creative process. What became apparent to me is that if we have 20 people in the room, is what I came to call the extraordinary mind, which is then we have a 21st mind. And that 21st mind is, in some respects, it's almost like a quantum mind, where this mind begins to go to work almost from a conscious level to a subconscious level in terms of generating insights as to how to go about attaining this goal. So, and what became really fascinating about this process is that it actually, over a period of time, it becomes part of the neurology of the way that the performers and the staff would work. And one of the things which would have informed my coaching practice, and my background originally is in education, is neuroscience. And so what would happen is it actually became part of the structure of the performers' brains. And a really fascinating case study was with a team that I worked with who, over a collective 140 years with virtually no experience of winning anything, as they dominated for 15 years after the system became embedded. So it operates, that 21st mind becomes the overarching mind of the team. Thanks, Nico.
Thank you. Catherine.
Yes, I'm just taking in what's been shared and thinking about there's a really remarkable and wonderful richness in the three of us and our styles. And I appreciate it so much because I think that when I think about my research, my process, 5 groups of coaches in reflective practice and supervision. So 21 coaches, 4 supervisors, 5 groups, 18 months. So you can imagine the richness of the amount of information there was. And when I first started writing a chapter for a book, I guess it was 2 or 3 years ago now, I was trying to take what was happening and put themes in and draw conclusions. And one of the things that I sent, Dave Adams is my advisor, and I sent him a rough draft of the first chapter, and he said, oh my gosh, you've taken the richness of what's going on in these groups and you flatlined it. That's not a quote, but that was the essence of what I took from him. And so my process became really an awakening to the richness of styles and vocabulary and perspectives, and the impact in any moment can be so different in each of us. And so it transformed my process to pay much more attention to the individual voices of the 26 of us, and to compare and contrast when we were in sessions, a moment when the impact on one person was dramatically different than the impact on the other person in the group, than the other person, than the other person. And then how do we take that? How do I take that? How do we collectively take that and draw any kind of meaning or sense from it that's sufficient to write about our experiences, other than by the richness of the detail of the description of what happened? And so my thesis became rich micro moments in 3 chapters. Group I supervised, another group I supervised, and then my 3 colleague groups. And then 3 chapters on what the heck might all this mean to those of us who work in groups of reflective practitioners in the virtual world. And so my process looked like this, lots of swirls. And that's my time. Back to you, Nico.
Richard, do you want to pick up from what Catherine was describing as working, you know, with obviously also working with a group of individuals?
Thanks. Yeah, so off the back of Alistair and Catherine and those experiences is, so looking at reimagining transdisciplinarity is working with multiple teams, looking at how we are working from the individual, the subject, into the team, and then the focus of the team on the object or the objective, and how each person's unique personal journey participates in this creative design process. And one of the things that came out of my research and looking back at this with multiple teams across being very fortunate to work in different parts of the world was being able to test whether it's possible to set up transdisciplinary teams that can work transculturally, can work transgeographically, and what can their impact be? Is transdisciplinarity a process which is learnable and coachable and can work across cultures and religions? And I can say a very affirmative yes. There's a beautiful process to it. And in one of the case studies which I researched, I was working as a high performance director, having moved from Southern Africa to the Caribbean, and working very much in a second to third world context, and working across 16 countries. And quite remarkably, it's the precursor to Zoom, but because of the scope of the Caribbean and the logistics of getting around being extremely difficult, is all of our work was on Zoom. It was either on teleconference, and then we moved to Zoom, and we came off the back of a very difficult period where there had been a strike, and we had a short window of time, about 18 months, to start planning for a World Cup, and putting teams together to be able to support performance teams that would be operating on the field, and planning this process and delivery and putting the teams together on Zoom, and these teams working with the performance teams to be able to deliver in World Cups in Asia over a space of 40 days. And they managed to deliver. Now, I'm not part of this in any way other than facilitating the teams in the background. And so the teams managed to deliver 3 World Cups over 40 days, which has never been done before. And in the research process is that it became clear to me there's a very, very clear, and I'm going to use this term again, there's a very clear architecture to this process. And I'm going to save it for my takeaway, but it's, I'll park that there before I go any further.
Thanks, Richard. And I'm very fascinated at how little by little some bridges between your practice and research are emerging, and also in this dance between you, Richard, are in South Africa, you, Catherine, in the US, Alistair, you're in the UK, clearly from your background. Please, so Catherine, go on. It's up to you now, and after that is Alistair again.
Thank you. I'm just thinking about what Richard shared about moving to Zoom. I have been in a virtual practice world since 2011. And so one of the limitations of my research is that I write about reflective practice in small groups in the supervision context in the virtual world, but I can't compare it to how it would be pre-pandemic. And so it's interesting to see how our stories are reimagined and bounded by different events within the world, within our contexts, and what our existing practice is. I think the biggest reimagining for me, there's so much here, but the biggest reimagining for me is that everything matters. And I know that sounds sort of trite, but I now pause my groups when someone uses a common phrase or a common term, for us to inquire as to what that phrase means to each of us. And when we do that, it is amazing how we have different definitions. And so my attention to what is coming into the room, in the room, and leaving the room. And I'll just share a brief story with you. As part of my research collection, it was the recordings of the actual sessions with my groups and then journaling entries as well that they would send me separately. And what was so interesting and opening for me that was that in their journaling, they wrote about things that, of course, I had no awareness of going on in the session. They wrote about having noticed how a colleague checked in a way that opened their heart, and yet when a client arrived in that state, they were impatient with the client to get on and make progress. And so they were noticing, how come I can hold this care with my colleague and not my client? And so for me, what has been most reimagined in my world is slowing down and inquiring about everything. Alistair, over to you.
You're very organized, Catherine. Alistair.
Thank you. So I saw my reimagining in the reflexive resourcing and harvesting of my inquiry in the different practice data that I presented. A first-person inquiry in collaboration with fellow associates into our long-term association with our client in common. A heuristic inquiry into relationships in my families of origin and procreation as containers of my personal transformation and flourishing. And a first-person inquiry into my capacity to intervene and scaffold the self-development of my coachees and clients within their own systems. This data demonstrated my constructivist view of the world that is pragmatic, phenomenological, and hermeneutic, taking whatever action makes sense and seems most effective, impacted by how I find myself to be, with whatever and whomsoever I encounter, interpreting and negotiating such experiences as they happen in real time. This resourcing and harvesting process can also be seen in the congruence of how I am with what I care about, how I show up and what I do. This congruence is my epistemology in action. It is how I know my experience of my evidence is real and true. I used qualitative research methods to interpret my experience and make my world visible in my inquiry. Autoethnography, grounded theory, reflections in and on action, self-dialogue, storytelling. I consciously developed a relational, dialogic, systemic, improvised practice through a bricolage of first-person action research approaches, methods, and processes. Some were carefully crafted, ready to use, things like create and curate processes, ethnodrama, field notes, learning history, photographs. Others were artfully improvised in the moment. Constellations, conversations, fridge magnet poetry, iPhone videos, iterative writing exercises, origami fortune tellers, reflective practice, and relational supervision. I used these research practices of living inquiry to co-create knowledge and know-how in the service of human flourishing, my own and that of others. It matters to me to discover and build my capacity to support my clients similarly, to inquire into their relationships with self and others, and to take choiceful action for their self-development and potential transformation of what we care about, how we show up, and what we do in the world.
Oh, Alistair, I'm so appreciating that list. You know, it takes me, I'm going to redo my takeaways here in the moment because of what you shared. It takes me to this whole concept of experimentation. And you raised all these ways for us to engage with ourselves and with the people that we work with. And I think that that is one of the biggest takeaways for me. I had been reading some things on supervisor self-disclosure, and I went into one of my groups that was really flat during the research and offered for them to supervise me. And it caused such consternation in the group. And for me, it was just an offering. Hey, would you like to supervise me? We had this fabulous conversation about what is mastery and what does it mean, and how could I need help if I was the supervisor? And that kind of experimentation with creativity, doing something for the first time with permission of the group, so opened up all of our relationships. That still today, 4 years later, is the most pivotal experience that group goes back to and back to and back to, of having expanded the safety of the container. So that use of creativity, that use of experimentation is my biggest takeaway. And inherent in that is the invitational process. Could we play? Could we do this? Would it be okay if? And so the delight for me in sharing my research results as I do this now in that invitational stance has just been gorgeous. So those are the two takeaways building on what you shared, Alistair. Richard, over to you.
Thanks, Catherine. A word which comes up and in the work that we do is this sense of play, this sense of exploration, and a sense of openness for us to be able to explore that. And you know, we're each speaking individually, and we're speaking from our metaphors from where we would practice and the industries that we would work in, or the industries that we work with and collaborate with. But of course, they're just metaphors, and we are, you know, as we work with them and collaborate with them, there's a bear with me when I use this analogy, but there's a larger game going on. And so one of the things that really came through in the research process was how in my industry, in my world, can transdisciplinarity, this exploration of this process over 3 decades of researching into human excellence and what that looks like and how that can deliver outcomes is how can in sharing this, how can this feed into some of the challenges that we have, hopefully post-COVID, and some of the challenges which we've got at societal level, some of the challenges that we've got with the planet. And what came out of it is just the absolutely incredible exponential potential for transdisciplinarity and coaching as a process to be able to craft, create, design, deliver solutions for the challenges which we've got. And I don't say any of from my previous, in narrating my journey in my career as a way of impressing people about cricket, because at the end of the day, it's just a sport. What I think is really, really powerful is the fact that when you are living and working in the third and the second world, the things that people take for granted in the first world by the way of resources, both financial, logistical, education, they operate at an unconscious level. When you live in the third and the second world, those things aren't there. And so when I share the case study, it's really if in the third and the second world, if you can compete against the first world and deliver outcomes where you completely outstrip them, I believe that transdisciplinarity has an unbelievable role to play post-COVID in being able to craft a better world and to be able to deliver on the types of change that we need in the world. And I think its time is now. Alistair, over to you.
Thank you. So the takeaways of what I do, the action of my action research is in the daily experiments I make in scaffolding the shift in my clients' experiences towards what is already within them for their own transformation and flourishing. Through the art and the craft of my practice, I coach, supervise, and facilitate the self-development of their practice. In practical terms, my contribution as a bricoleur is to make sense of my experience in the moment, using whatever methods, processes, tools are immediately to hand that are able to connect and engage my clients in noticing themselves and what's presenting for them in their current situation. And within that carefully crafted route map of where we might go, there is then the improvised art of noticing and acknowledging where we already find ourselves to be. Gregory Bateson tells us that all relational living systems have the capacity to adapt to changes in their environment without any externally imposed plan or direction. Homeostasis, the steady state of equilibrium required for optimal functioning, is maintained by an organism's own somatic awareness of the changes in its situation. Similarly, complex adaptive systems such as families, cities, organizations, and sovereign nations these days are interconnected, interacting continuously in interdependent ways to produce new patterns of behavior, to restore a pragmatic and acceptable balance of integration, complementarity, and collaboration within the system. Such a living systemic view predicates a sense of the interconnectedness of all things, that everything is personal and interpersonal, and nothing is impersonal. What matters to me matters to us. What matters to us matters to us all. Simply bringing our experience of ourselves, each other, and our situation into our conscious awareness is already developmental. So finally, what of my first person inquiry is actionable by others? I have three glib answers. Firstly, nothing at all, obviously, because you are not me. Secondly, absolutely everything, obviously, because you too can live life as inquiry and induce your own living theory of practitioner development that will be wholly real and true for you. And thirdly, whatever is of use, obviously, from what you find of value in my experiences that you're able to transfer and apply to your own practice in your own way. And of course, you're only able to find it to be of value by trying it out for yourself.
Thank you to all of you. And we have seen how you represent several different dimensions, but when I look at what is on the mirror board, you know, some of the keywords like openness, curiosity, embracing subjectivity, coherence beyond boundaries, I can see all those keywords reflected in all your different work. So even though we're going to have very shortly an open forum session, I still would like to open up right now and pose this conversation and open up to the floor, to the audience for any comments and reaction and question that you might have. So I'm going to take out the spotlight so we can see all together the audience in the room, so to speak. I'm not able to. So now is the time for anyone who would like to react to what you heard or have any specific question to any of the speakers to, just to maybe raise your hand or put your name into the chat and I'll give you the microphone. we actually had one comment earlier in the which was about what really slowing down can mean to us, and that maybe expanding on that idea. I don't know whether, Catherine, you want to pick that up, and while we're waiting for other comments.
Well, I think it would be great if, just, as I talked about language, what does slowing down mean to each of us? And maybe you would just share in the chat a phrase or a concept, or what does it mean when I say that, slowing down? Oh, emergent listening, isn't that beautiful? Reflection. Yeah. Spaciousness. Mindfulness, decluttering, yeah. Baking. Listening, avoiding screens, and here we all are. Taking time. Both the UK and the US have poets with both of us have Judy Brown as poets. There's an English Judy Brown and American Judy Brown. She has the American Judy Brown has a poem on fire, and let me just read a little bit of it because I think it's relevant to this question. What makes a fire burn is space between the logs, a breathing space. And for me, that's what this is about. Building fires requires attention to the spaces in between as much as to the wood. Yeah, intentional awareness.
I think there's also something that comes from noticing flow and energy differently. So often we have a view of slowing down that is in comparison to the busyness and the greater energy of being in flow. And I'd like to suggest that it is just another speed of being in flow, from which we notice other things differently. In my own case, it was very essential for me to take 2 years off in the middle of my doctoral inquiry to get on with some troublesome bits of life that were not forming an orderly queue and presenting themselves at a time that they could be dealt with more effectively. So things had to slow down and take account of them.
Just picking up on that theme with regards to space, just going back to the extraordinary mind when you bring people together and you create this quantum space to be able for insight to come in. And when we're so busy doing lots of thinking, we operate typically from the known, which is memory, intellect. And when we're present and thinking drops away and we are in the moment, and in that moment is new insight can come in, new ideas can come in. And so Nicolescu would speak to this. And for those who are interested in the practical sides of transdisciplinarity, I don't know if they have a great deal of time for the Nicolescuian school, but that this space for where we create is a place where new ideas can be generated, where new design, new creation takes place, and that really is a quantum space, and that's where we can solve some of the challenges that we are faced with, because when we keep on going back to the known, it's the known that's created these challenges.
Yeah, I have something I want to offer, but not if there are questions. So I keep looking to see if there are additional questions. But, you know, for me, the journey is encapsulated, I think, in this quote by Rachel Naomi Remen, who's a medical doctor in the US. Perhaps the secret of living well is not in having all the answers, but in pursuing unanswerable questions in good company. And the people that I have engaged with through their books, through their articles, in person, through this journey, has been such a delightful, life-expanding, curiosity-provoking experience. And to have witnessed earlier the cohort, the 09 cohort, and just seeing their interplay was just beautiful. I think that's what this is all about in many respects. How do we expand our worlds and our connections?
Oh, okay, so I don't know whether Alastair or Richard, you want to say any last word? I just want to ask to everybody, maybe if feel free to follow up with any thought on this session on the Miro board, because then we're going to bring together everything which is on the board throughout the days. I also want to say that you probably by now want to know more about the practice and the research of Richard, Catherine, and Alastair. So I'm going to post in the chat some links that you can follow to know more. So I have a link for Richard and Catherine. Alastair, I don't have anything from you, but if you like to then post yourself, then we can do that. And so is there any last word from any of you, Richard, Alastair, Catherine, before we close the session?
No, just a big thank you to Middlesex, big thank you to Alastair and to Catherine for sharing.
Yes, indeed,
Okay.
Ditto to you, Richard.
And thanks to all the three of you, of course. I will now pass the word to Dave, who will introduce the next session.
Thank you, Nico. I think that discussion you've just had about what we mean by slowing down is a fascinating contribution to this discussion. And I've just started cutting and pasting from the chat room onto Miro. And I don't know if anybody would like to sort of also add to that discussion, but I've just added another frame that will allow us to sort of capture things on that particular idea. And this is a good opportunity for me just to remind you that the Miro board is open. It will stay open overnight and into the session tomorrow. So feel free, if you would like to be adding to it, that you can contribute to build up this web of ideas and images that reflect our understanding of being transdisciplinary practitioners. But this final session, it's a delight for me to be able to introduce you to Jane Ridderford. I've known Jane now for a little while. I first heard about her before I had the privilege of chairing her Viva some years ago. Jane is, like Alastair, in fact, a graduate of our partner program with the Ashridge Business School. And Jane has been running a charity in London and has been using the principles of action research she developed in her research now in her organization. She happens to be now located on I think you called it a sabbatical, Jane, in New Zealand. Which is why you weren't able to join us right away at the beginning of the session, but you've been listening for the last hour or so. And we're looking forward to you taking us through this last session, which is an open forum. An open forum literally means there's no one person speaking with a prepared message. It's an open space for us to share with one another our reflections. So I'm going to hand over to you, Jane, to introduce this. And then everyone who's still with us, please feel free to contribute in whatever way you would like to the discussion. Continue to feed the Miro board. I will be monitoring the chat room. So if you want to say something, you can just put a note in there to ask for an opportunity to speak. Or if there's a moment of silence, you might want to fill it. But Jane, a delight to have you with us. I'll hand it over to you. Can you unmute your mic? Great.
Thanks very much, Dave, and hello, everybody. Yeah, it's a delight to join all of you, and it kind of feels like a transdisciplinary thing to do, messy, emergent, and wonderful, and feeling connections in a different shape. So in the last hour, I've just been looking at the Miro board and listening to the call and looked at some of the notes Dave's made, and seeing that there really is these kind of threads that has come through over the last few hours. You've all been together. It's pretty early in the morning for me. It's like, well, I started listening at about 5 in the morning, and I thought I really, it reminded me of a poem that I wanted to share with you. It's from someone called Rosemary Wahala Trauma, and it's called "At Some Point It's Clear. So little of life's sweetness can be planned. Oh, meals, of course, and sometimes children, but mostly joy loves a surprise, loves when schedules get shuffled and agendas unravel, and suddenly there's a space for bliss to step in, dressed in calamity's clothes. So easy to praise what looks like success, but teach me to give thanks for the mess, whatever is burnt, broken, wounded, fumbled, missed. Teach me to be open in each unscripted moment to the bloom of gratefulness. So I was hearing a lot that came through the Miro board and some of the last session around these more unknown, untangible, not able to hold on to, but glimpsed within little in-between moments of time, things like spirit, a sense of the beyond, serendipity, chaos. And then in the last session, Catherine just spoke about slowing down, and there were some wonderful responses in the chat. What bubbles up slowly between us when we shift gear and change our rhythm. So I thought, as a way of just beginning to notice things that have perhaps surfaced in our consciousness during the last few hours, but we didn't, that perhaps we didn't quite notice fully enough, or that might be speaking to us now, would just take a minute to really shift gear and slow down. And we can do that together across the virtual space. So if you'd like to just sit up in your chairs and feel your spine and feel yourself, first of all, as a body, the physicality of yourself. You can close your eyes if that helps. Feel your feet on the ground and yourself sitting on your chair. And then notice any tension that you're holding in your body and consciously let that go. And then just notice carefully that the way you're breathing without having to do that, that's something that wonderfully happens all by itself. And then put your attention on the space within yourself and beyond yourself, and that sense of space that doesn't finish with yourself. And then now from that space and that slowing down, and in a sense that emptiness, could start to do some free fall writing and just, what is it that is speaking to me now from what I have heard over the last few hours? So we're just going to take a minute or two, a couple of minutes, just to see what comes onto the page. And I'm sure all of you have done free fall writing. So just let yourself write and let yourself be surprised. So what is it that is speaking to me now? Okay, so just finish the sentence you're on and we'll begin the discussion. And if you would use the chat, because I think there's quite a few people on. I can't actually see everybody on my screen, so I don't know how many there are, but I think there are. So I think the easiest is if you, rather than using the putting up your hand function, you use the chat function.
Yeah, and I'll keep an eye on that so that we can just bring different people in as they wish to share. Maybe you want to share a bit of what you wrote in the free fall writing.
And it's yeah, it really struck me that transdisciplinarity, we do have to create space to stand outside the known and the conditioned reality of how things are, and we can orchestrate that, and it needs to be intentional and deliberate, the stopping, but then to enable different configurations to emerge, and they do. I've been so it would be great to hear what has come up for all of you.
I noticed that Docs here has posted a note that I think is quite interesting. Perhaps you'd like to say more about this, Docs. Complexity can be transformative. This is what you captured from the discussions.
Yes, absolutely. Listening to all the interesting contributors from a wide range of disciplines, that's what I sort of captured in essence. You know, from what Alistair was saying, from what Richard was saying, Catherine and Malti and Alan as well. Really, essentially, they were talking about complex issues and the way that they were going about trying to capture that complexity within their research, within their, you know, practice. That's what I captured.
Thanks, Docs. That's great.
Zandy, I just noticed you're feeling very grounded, I think, in what you're saying on your comment. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I don't mind. I think I entered the session not feeling grounded at all. So I'm kind of in a space of like complete messiness. I feel completely immersed by what's going on and all sorts of feelings and thoughts, and been impacted quite deeply by some of the research that I'm doing that I'll talk a little bit more about tomorrow. But I think what the session has really given me is just like a sense of, yeah, I'm where I'm meant to be, that it's okay. And what I love the process, Jane, just now doing that reflective, that writing piece, because it was, what emerged for me was that I'm like in this process of almost like unraveling a gift, like there's different layers of me that I'm discovering, and that I should take my time and appreciate that process. So that's where I am.
And it's interesting what you say about unraveling a gift. I mean, that somehow that gift is something not outside yourself, but it's the closest, deepest part of oneself. And we talked about, I noticed in some of the themes, or the whole notion of starting with oneself. But actually, the deeper we go, the more there's this unknownness and a sense of a gift, of the closest thing to us, and yet it's endlessly unknown and endlessly surprising. And yeah, that kind of combination of purposefulness and yet enabling the mystery to come in, and the messiness and the wonder in that. Oh, someone's also, yeah, the opposite words. Yeah, that's right. Is that, I'm sorry,
That's Vanessa.
Vanessa Kimball. Okay, I can. Do you want to say more about what struck you in that, Vanessa?
You're on mute, Vanessa.
Sorry, there we are. I'm just going to say it could just be
that I'm running a slight fever. I had my COVID jab on Friday. Don't want to put anyone off, so but I was struck by something that was said in this, and it kind of made a lot of what I'm thinking make absolute sense. And that was, I made notes, but actually that simplicity and complexity are opposites, but they need each other. And the subject that I am looking at is bread, and particularly sourdough. And in the simplest terms, it's flour, salt, and water. That's it. But the complexity of it is, I mean, I say quite simply, like most people, I'm looking at what somebody else referred to as the blank sheet of paper, and there's so much to try and reduce it down to. The complexity seems overwhelming, but then actually what was just said about the opposites and being complete was that the simplicity and the complexity kind of like the yin and the yang. I think that, I can't remember the lady who was describing it, but it was like someone just put a picture in front of me and just clicked, because it suddenly made perfect sense. What I have to do, because there are so many disciplines that there's no full stop. So it's that lady's perspective has just really given me, I guess, probably almost a bit of clarity in all this. So thank you.
I love what you say about bread just being flour, salt, and water, and yet it's so much more than that. And it seems to highlight the whole thing of this transdisciplinarity is creating the conditions to go beyond the thingness of our world. And you think about, yeah, go for it.
In my work around me, I've gone all the way down from looking at the agricultural systems, the way in which the botanical blends that we put together reflect the ecosystem. I've then taken that back into the gut microbiome, and then been researching and examining the way that different blends of flour, by re-examining what flour is, then impacts the gut microbiota and the balance of the microbes within the gut, back to mental health and how that impacts the way we feel. I brought that back into systems, and I'm actually translating the work into bread that actually nourishes, and that then you taking that into across another discipline. That's I'm working on the manufacturing system. So having to take that complexity of gastroenterologists, microbiologists, doctors, dietitians, all the way through to farmers, millers, processors, and then back into the manufacturing process, and then translate that into supporting my community and supporting change. I really didn't know where to start, but actually looking at those two aspects of simplicity of flour, salt, and water against the entire world, which is essentially what this is, it suddenly made sense.
Wow, I love that. It was quite a few years ago, I heard about someone else was doing their PhD on making bread at Princeton, and they taught the story of the universe through making bread. And you've just described so many different aspects of the universe. And I remember many years ago working with a group of children and construction workers, and we made sourdough starter, and they did a free fall writing at the end on bread is amazing because, and the quantity surveyor wrote, bread is amazing because it started with a love affair between hydrogen and oxygen. And
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, in some ways you've communicated that to us.
I specialise in sourdough. I'm sourdough.co.uk, so you've hit the nail on the head with that.
Well, I'll be checking you out. But maybe this has touched on something for others in terms of, yeah, that might have resonance for you, or resonance of what's come up for you in the last few sessions.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. And I'm sorry if I'm a bit...
Thank you very much.
Poorly from this COVID jab, so I'm a bit Sorry, but thank you.
Oh, well, if that's what the COVID jab does to you, it doesn't seem to be too bad. Thank you. Does anyone else want to add in?
I'm just wondering, Jill, whether anybody who was in the earlier sessions and contributed is still with us, would like to reflect on what they've heard as we've gone through the day. Otherwise, I'll ask you a question.
Sure, but
somebody's
okay,
asking for your gluten-free sourdough recipe, Vanessa.
Well, gluten-free depends on how many parts per million, and that is dependent on the length of fermentation. And I let the microbes do the work to do the gluten-free. I leave the gluten in there and let the microbes destroy it. So that's my...
There you go. Well, I think that's a conversation to take offline. Great.
I would be curious if anyone felt like sharing it, just to have a look back over what you did do in your free fall writing, and if there was a line or a sentence or two that you felt able to share, either to read it would be great or to put it in the chat, because I think there is something about weaving together a collective tapestry, and then finding these natural connections that are within it. So that would be, if you were up for doing that, that would be really great. Dave, what did you write in your free fall?
Well, I was being a little naughty because at that time I was actually filling up the Miro board with comments. So my apology for that. But I just noticed a comment here coming up on the chat room from MRG. I wonder if you'd like to just develop that or comment further on that. This is going back to the theme of slowing down.
Yeah, hi everyone. I guess what's come out of the last 4 hours for me, and I'm looking at this from a practical place of as an opera singer, the last 15 years has been about eliminating a lot of physical blocks so that when you create a sound or a set of frequencies, sound frequencies and vibrations, they can translate to an audience as clear as possible without any impediment. Much like a cello, if a cello is made with a knot in the wood, then you won't get the full sound out of the cello. And just that notion of purity and the fact that everyone that spoke today spoke of this notion of kind of opening up and hearing more and taking more on. And it sort of said to me, what if we flip that around and said, well, actually, it's a personal responsibility to be in that state of being able to acknowledge and accept that, in fact, to not understand difference, to not be present, is actually a state of resistance on some level. So, the personal responsibility becomes, a constant act of opening up. If there's points within my body when I sing, then there's going to be limitation as to what people can actually engage with as an audience. So my personal responsibility as a practitioner is to, do the work, inverted commas, to make sure that, there's no points of resistance physically and somatically. And I've found that kind of interesting. That in fact, if it's slowing down, is part of one's practice. Mm-hmm. And for me, the TD practice was very much, it seems to me, early days, to be very much linked to that you actually, You know, it's not duty per se, but certainly responsibility. You know, to question yourself, to you know, to understand, to open yourself more to connection and be vulnerable. You know, it's a constant state of development. Yeah, I guess that's what I got out of it.
I love what you're saying, and I mean also the you know, that was kind of a new way of thinking about it for me, in terms of thinking about ourselves with the as an instrument, and as an instrument for something bigger than ourselves. And the way you spoke about that, doing the work, or the personal responsibility to, you know, am I creating the right conditions with myself to be, yeah, available for what might come.
Yeah, right. So in some sense, you know, that is the objective, is to land yourself in a state somatically, intellectually, emotionally, physically, where you're actually able to receive. And in fact, that allows you to give. And then that cycle becomes a lot faster and a lot more intuitive. And I think it kind of reminds me of stepping on stage. The first 5 minutes is horrendous, but the next hour and a half is incredibly calm. And it takes discipline to not stop and listen to the energy that's in a 2,000-seat theatre, you know.
Wow. Wow.
And there's an enormous calm in that. So I wonder if that notion of personal responsibility leads us to a place of, you know, Catherine was speaking about it as well, so was Alistair, where there's this notion of great, you know, calm presence and a heightened level of listening, you know, in it, which I think is probably fundamental as part of the TD practice, I would have thought. Yeah.
Well, they're wonderful metaphors, just that we're bread makers and we're musicians. And
we're bricoleurs. I see that Alistair wants to come in, the performance bricoleur.
So I think of what you've just said as working relationally. So there's a surface level of relationality that provides enough psychological safety to work with this person, with this audience. And then there is a relational level in relation to what each other brings in our conversation or in our interaction or in a quality of relationship that enables the work. And there's a third level for me of working relationally, which is in relation to the work itself as it unfolds between us in real time, which is constantly emergent. And despite all attempts to have a route map or an agenda or a plan, requires noticing and paying attention to what seems to be happening. And perhaps there is a deeper level of working relationally where I am noticing how I'm impacted by that. So I'm noticing something of my client in myself in order to offer it back. What I'm thinking or what's happening for me is. So I think of all of that as working relationally.
I see that Nadia Aruri has come up with an interesting question about the balance between speeding up and slowing down. Nadia, do you want to say something about that?
Preferably not. I would like to hear people's opinions on that.
Well, it's a good question. So, yeah.
Or maybe I'll just say a few words. Like, having done my doctorate with Kate, one important notion was the non-binary, but also the common mistake we tend to fall into by offering recipes of how to get to transdisciplinarity or how to get to anything really, and how much it is about providing the framework, the space for things to emerge. And I just feel that there are some recipes emerging, such as slowing down being the recipe, the method. And I wonder, is it the way to go forward, or what is the non-binary balance there?
Can you say, what is the non-binary balance? Do you want to just even say what you, maybe something will come out in what you mean by that term?
Well, the binary is a certain right and wrong, and there has been an emphasis throughout the afternoon of slowing down being the right way to go ahead. And I wonder, I'm not saying slowing down is not necessary, but in a way, how do we find the balance? And as I wrote, one important aspect that does happen sometimes by slowing down too much, reflecting too much on our psyche, on our being, on ourself, although transdisciplinarity starts definitely with the self. But one thing that could emerge is paralysis by analysis, where we're stuck in turning our own soup around. So how do we ensure we maintain the practice, we maintain the doing, while possibly slowing down and reflecting and taking the time to get to know the self out of which the practice is emerging?
I like what you say, and I think it's actually great because I sometimes think about it as a process of going fast and going slow, and this being prepared to lean forward and stumble and fall and catch the winds of the universe and as they come. Because it can sound like when we talk too much about going slow, that it's actually a hyper-controlled, as you say, a process. But there is something also in this, maybe going slow. It does feel like going slow, but it also can enable us to go fast. And it sounds a bit trite to say, but there is a sense of that I have, at least, and I've seen heard from others in the comments, getting out of the way. So not just being stuck with, all of our ideas and our analysis, but actually, people have spoken about extended epistemology. So using all of our different ways of knowing, and some of that's fast and some of that's slow. Has anyone else got any comments on what Nadia's written?
I find conversation as a medium takes me into discovering what I didn't know I knew. My enthusiasm, my positivity, my ambition, or my reluctance, or my skepticism, but it all comes out in the flow of the conversation that is unstructured, totally emergent, and usually pointless. But nevertheless allows me to notice, in addition to the content, there is a dynamic that is, for me, often much more powerful than what it is I've actually said.
Right. But that's the interest, there's something like the dynamic, that space between you and the other person. And that doesn't, it seems it doesn't always happen in conversation at all. It's not, but when it does, there's this other, it's some kind of, what do you call it? Other, deeper, different, more meaningful dimension, hard to name, but it has a purposefulness about it. Yeah. And Makbul said, slowing down can give us the space to see what we may have missed. And then we have a Gergen, something from Gergen. We interanimate each other. Oh, that's lovely. We interanimate each other. Yeah. So I think one of the things that seems we're talking about and keep on talking about is just making room for different ways of knowing ourselves, and different ways of and enabling ourselves to know the world out there, but not just from a small rational mind. And that takes some, as earlier, this discipline to do the work, to be conscious, not just to go on automatic.
Okay, sorry. If I come in there?
Yeah, great.
Jane. Okay. I just noticed we're coming more to, well, quite close to closing now. And I just wanted to have the opportunity to say a few things about the day and experiences of the day. But first of all, I'd really like to thank all the contributors, all the candidates and alumni for you all coming and sharing this space. And actually sharing it in those sessions with people you possibly haven't met before, and all at different stages and from different sectors and roles, and just being able to have the conversation. I'd also like to thank Dominic and Christiana, who have been in the background all the time, orchestrating all of this. And we started to work with them fairly recently, and it's been a delight. So I really would like to thank them very, very much. I'd also like to thank our team. You've been meeting them today as they're running the sessions. And tomorrow we have Radical Creativity, which is really looking at the creativity in our environments, how to be creative. And some of that comes from a very intentional TD, but most of it comes from something else, which I have found on the program and I've found in the symposium extremely moving, which is, I don't think we've ever, I just think we must be so lucky, but actually it's a real wonderful feeling to know how many people are out there that are, in a sense, right-minded, that they want to make a difference. They want to use themselves and their passion to make a difference because they notice that something is not okay. And I suppose, Jane, I will share with you that before this open forum, I was seeing that people were having to go. And I wrote a text today saying, I think we need to sort of energize it a little bit. And then you went into actually the slowing down. And I thought, well, that's interesting for me. What's all that about? And I realized it's because action also is something about deflecting from something. And I think the deflection is about this, my free fall writing was something about the experience of the heaviness in the environment, the resistance to the great humanity that people have, and the great compassion and grace and kindness and sharing. And that's been with us all day long. And I'm sitting wondering how, when that free fall thing came, I'm thinking, my goodness, I need to slow down because sometimes it's very painful to slow down.
Yeah.
Because there is something about, you know, there is this quote in the Bible that says, first we see through a glass darkly, and then we see more clearly. But sometimes what we see clearly is awful. And so we go into action of doing good. And so I would just like to say that this today has been absolutely, the whole day is a cause for reflection, and a real encouragement that all of you just go out there and you just spread it. You know, you're the good virus that's going out there. You know, I love it. It's great. So I would just you know, say thank you, and really look forward to seeing as many of you as you can come tomorrow for our Radical Creativity Day. And as you will have seen from the program, we're looking at that sort of creativity, which is quite energetic in the moment. And then we're looking at the quieter incremental steps. And then we're looking at why would a creative, like someone like Martin, why would a creative come into our program, and what would they get out of it when we're, you know, extolling the virtues of being, you know, imaginative and creative and wonderful. So I hope I haven't missed anyone out. Of course, the Vice Chancellor is joined us right at the beginning of the pandemic, really, and has been a breath of fresh air and very, very supportive. And of course, Paul Gibbs, who is who's a constant in our search for using transdisciplinary also as an articulation of these feelings that we have, a way that we can translate to the world, that we're not all kind of a bit dippy and nutty, a bit hippie. In my case, that would be probably quite right. But just so that we can share much more with each other. So I would really like to thank everybody today for that, and wish you a very, very good and well-deserved evening. And Jane, you need to go to bed.
No, I've just got up. I'm not going to bed, but
wonderful, wonderful. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.